It's a team effort.
It is a team effort tonight, let me tell you. My back is out. So, tonight's agenda is reorganization, visitors, National Council of Teachers of English, Mr. Alan Keller, Emergency Communication Systems, Chief O'Leary, 2007-8 school calendar, district improvement plan, discussion on student policy, discipline policy, bid award number 20714, asbestos abatement and replacement, Igo Elementary School, budget summary update, FY07 surplus, other matters, and executive session for non-union negotiations.
Will we be coming back into session after the
No,
executive session?
we will not be coming into open session.
Okay.
And for the purpose of organizing the school committee at its first regular meeting, following the town's annual elections, will elect from its membership a chairman and a clerk, all of whom will hold their respective office for a term of 1 year or until a successor is elected. At this time, I'd like to take a nomination from the floor for chairman.
Madam Chairman, I would like to nominate Larry Harrington for our next chairperson.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Any further nominations? All those in favor? Here you go.
Thank you very much.
I have to apologize. We will relocate, but unfortunately, I'm having a problem moving tonight, and it would be, I knew once I sat down, I probably would not be getting back up, so please.
Except to go home.
Yeah, except to go home.
Well, I want to thank my fellow committee members for their support and their confidence, and I promise you I'll do the very best I can. The next item then would be to elect the vice chairman, clerk, secretary, chief bottle washer, minute taker, and so I will open for nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Bev Wood.
I'll second that.
Any other nominations?
That was because I didn't want to take notes. Deb does take them better than I do.
All those in favor?
Well, I guess
Congratulations, you.
Thank you very much.
I'll hold that in reservation, thank you. I'll check in with you later on that.
Remember, we always have Wendy.
Thank heavens. When's your birthday, Wendy? Do you want flowers?
No, I think we have to send money.
The next item on the agenda are visitors. Are there any visitors that would like to speak this evening? Yes, ma'am, would you please come up to the microphone, state your name for the record?
Janet Fisher, 24 Cannon Forge Drive. Over the weekend, I enjoyed the Foxborough High School Pops concert, particularly the premiere performance of Mark Miller's Blessed Village piece, recognizing Jack Otholet's long service to the community. That piece is particularly meaningful when you think about the importance of volunteers in the school community. And I just have to look across the room to see 5 of the most committed volunteers are school committee members, and we thank them for that. Listening to the Blessed Village composition was encouraging to me as we move into the home stretch time of the year when the energy of volunteers can tend to be a little bit depleted. It made me think of what I've gotten in return for my volunteer efforts and what I've learned. Particularly from being part of a school council, I've learned that parents need to be educated by the professional staff to be able to really understand academic issues. The parent point of view needs to be broadened. Additionally, input from the parent community helps schools make the best decisions. I'm encouraged at the direction of the school committee in encouraging parental and community involvement. I think this builds stronger support for our schools because when you get involved, you're more invested in making the schools the best that they can be. Last Thursday at the high school council meeting, all the parents shared their initial reaction to news of the recent lockdowns. Marie Dede, whose youngest child is graduating this year, commented that although of course she was concerned, she was not panicked about the lockdown. That was because she's gotten to know the Foxborough High School staff and felt comfortable that they would be doing the very best to ensure the safety of all the students. All the parents on school council felt the same way, and I thought it was important to share that. So that's another benefit I've gained as a school council volunteer, the peace of mind that you get from having confidence in the staff on the front lines working with your kids. I also want to thank the parents that brought forth concerns about communication after the lockdown and let them know as their representative I shared those concerns with the Foxborough High School administration. I'm hopeful that the school committee and administration will listen to parent concerns and input in evaluating our response to the lockdowns and considering ways to improve. It's encouraging to see a discussion about emergency communication on tonight's agenda. So although it's sometimes tiring and not too much fun to be the one who asks the tough questions, as all of you up there know, and brings forth feedback from the community, I'm hoping that it brings added value. When we listen to each other and learn, the decisions we make in the end are better. We prove the accuracy of the African saying that inspired that Blessed Village composition that I found so meaningful on Sunday afternoon. It truly does take a village to raise a child.
Janet, thank you. And would you leave a copy of that with Wendy, please? What we've decided as a committee is when someone has a statement like that, we will attach it to the minutes so that there's no misinterpretation as to what their summary was about. Any other visitors wish to speak this evening? Yes, ma'am, come forward.
Good evening, Deborah Navedo from Spruce Street, and congratulations, Mr. Harrington.
Thank you.
Welcome to the chair. And thank you, Ms. Larry. I had two areas of thoughts. We've been following the activities of the school committee recently, and I know we're armpit deep, to put it kindly, in policy formation. And I would like to make just briefly...
Could you speak up a little louder, Deb, please?
Okay. I'd like to briefly make, can you hear me in the back if I speak up? I'm sorry, okay. Relying on the microphone too much, I'm sorry. About the policy review that's going on right now, I want to say that that's a wonderful thing that is occurring, seeing as we have policies that are obsolete and such. Sometimes, even though they're in the books, not being enforced has been frustrating to parents, and so I think it's a good thing that we're finally making a full review, even though we don't discuss it a whole lot here at the regular school committee meetings. I think that a regular update is appropriate, and thank you. It's been part of the meeting. I did want to point out that there were some areas that, one in particular, the new policies have letter headings and they don't have paragraph numbers, and I was wondering if maybe that was something that we could look at briefly as you go forward with the policy review, to make sure that when there's a reference to a portion of a policy, we don't have to count down paragraph number 3, sentence number 2, even though the numbers don't appear. You have to sit there and count paragraphs and sentences. Just a thought on that. Okay. I do see that the district improvement plan is on the agenda for this evening. I briefly looked at it because I really had only the weekend to look at it, and thank you. This is a wonderful compilation and a wonderful place to start. I did have some questions, and I was wondering when would be an appropriate time for me to make some brief comments about that.
When we discuss the issue, I'll open up for any comments that anyone has, and you'll be free to speak at that point.
Okay, very good. In which case, I'll defer to that time.
Okay, fine. Thank you
Thank
very much. Any other comments from any other visitors? If not, we'll run a little ahead of schedule. We'll ask Mr. Keller to join us.
If you don't mind, I'll start the introductions. Mr. Keller, if you'll bring your two students with you. First of all, I'd like to commend Mr. Keller. As all of you know, he is the assistant principal at the Ahern Middle School. But what you may not know is he has another title. He was the state coordinator for Promising Young Writers Program, which was put together by the National Council for Teachers of English. So we are very honored to be in his presence, having put together that entire program. And then, because of all the work he did with NCTE, he also has two students to present to you this evening who received recognition. Mr. Keller, would you tell us about your program?
I will, actually. Thank you for having us here tonight. And this year is the 22nd year of the Promising Young Writers Program. It's, as Dr. Norton indicated, it's run by the NCTE. Which is one of only a handful, actually less than a handful, of programs that are approved by the National Association of Secondary School Principals for writing programs for middle school. So there's very few. This is a highly regarded program, and it's also a program that many students participate in. There were over 650 students nominated to participate in the program this year. Each student submits 2 pieces of writing, a best piece of writing, what they consider to be their best, and that can be either prose or poetry. As well as an impromptu writing piece. And students are given a prompt, and they have 75 minutes to respond to that prompt. This year's prompt was, if you could go back to another time for one day, whom would you like to meet? So all the students' entries are then submitted to the state coordinators, and then I send them out to judges, and at least 2 judges in each state evaluate the students' writing. They're evaluated for content, purpose, organization, development, word choice, tone, style. And I'm honored tonight to have 2 students who not only were nominated by their teachers, but actually received certificates of recognition, and they have joined us here this evening. So I would like to present the certificate of recognition to them. Their parents are here, and I'd also like to recognize the teachers as well who nominated them. So the first student is Caroline Camerano.
They'd like us out here so they can see us. Just turn around and they can catch that camera right up there, okay?
So Caroline Camerano, who was recommended by her teacher, Mr. Tom Gill. Congratulations, Caroline. And the second student is Megan Sanchioni, who was recommended by her teacher, Ms. Leslie Palladino.
And Mr. Keller, we go on to the next one. Congratulations. Thank you for representing.
Alan, I want to take a moment to congratulate the parents as well. I would tell you that, just from my view, today in business, writing is a lost art. And people in business simply don't know how to write as well as they did before. And to have a passion for writing, as I'm sure that these 2 students have, and to have that nourished by their parents and encouraged by their parents is a wonderful, wonderful skill, and something that will be with them for a very, very long period of time. It's an important skill today, and I congratulate you for putting the effort into it.
I'm going to add to it and tell you that in my former life, I was a high school English teacher. I continued to be a member of the NCTE. You were up against a tough crowd. That means you're an excellent writers and you have a wonderful future. It's a privilege to meet both of you. Thank you. And parents, thanks.
Okay, we now have a couple of sets of minutes to approve. The first set of minutes I'd like us to talk about is the April 9, 2007 regular meeting minutes. I'll do it separately because this. Any comments or corrections on these minutes? I had one change on page 2 that I wanted to suggest. At the bottom, the second to last paragraph, it says, committee discussion continued regarding the Think Math program. The cost of the Think Math program was discussed at approximately $75,000 to $76,000. The exact figure is not yet set due to final inventory. We also discussed at that time some of the additional materials that were going to be necessary. And in another set of minutes, we're talking about $15,000 or $25,000 of additional materials. So I didn't want the record to imply that we approved 75 one week and then another 25 the next week. So I just thought that we might say after the 75 to 76 plus manipulatives or whatever the word is, Jan, that you think is appropriate there, so that it makes reference to the fact there was additional cost incurred.
Additional support materials.
Plus additional support materials.
All right.
Okay.
And the only other comment I would make on this minutes is that when you look here on page 3, the McGuire group, I'd like to ask Paul to work to put that on the agenda for our next meeting so that we can update the community on that work that was done and where do we stand with the proposal for the high school. Any other comments in the set of minutes? I'll accept a motion to approve. Motion made by Katie. Mark it a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I'd now like us to look at the April 30th, 2007 minutes. Any questions or comments? I think, Wendy, you have a couple.
Yeah.
On page 2, about halfway down, the vote for the ELA program, I didn't quite finish that, if you'll notice at the end. It says at a cost of question mark, and I didn't go back and look, so I'll have to go back and look to double check on the figure. And then just down below it says substitute teacher salary adjustment, it should say teacher, not teach. So I don't know whether you want to table these, and I'll go back and look at the figure.
The figure is $35,373.
373.
Yes, it's on the sheets that everyone's going through.
Question for you, Jan, on the substitute teacher salary adjustment. Did we notify all the substitute teachers of the new policy and the new rates?
No, we have not.
Can we make sure
Send a
we do
letter out
that?
to all the substitutes.
I believe it has been
Oh,
completed.
you did send it.
Okay. Just, this is the first raise they've had in 8 years, so we ought to make sure that they're well aware of it.
Hopefully they were watching
I think
that
most
night.
of them are, but we shouldn't miss anyone, that's for sure.
Any other corrections or changes to the minutes?
You know, Larry, could I ask Dr. Norton to repeat that number, though, the 35,373? There's back to the city.
Motion to accept,
I'll make that.
made by Martha, seconded by Katie. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Now, on the special minutes for April 5th, it shows the members that were present, but it doesn't show any of the staff that were present at that meeting. And there were staff there at that meeting. So I know we didn't have the whole staff here, but we had some of the staff here that night. I just don't remember which one of the four you were here.
Back over my notes.
Okay. I think Paul was here,
I believe it.
so we need to reflect that there. Any other changes or comments in the minutes?
Make a motion to accept.
Motion to accept by Martha, seconded by Kate. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. The next item on the agenda is a discussion of the emergency communication system. Chief O'Leary, do you mind coming up front, please? Jan, do you want to kick this off? Or do
Sure,
you want
be
the
happy
chief
to. Well, I didn't know where Chief was, so
No,
I'll kick it and you.
I think Dr.
accept
Norton
it.
could orient us a little bit with the work that we've been doing.
Okay.
Yes, following the lockdown that Ms. Fisher referred to earlier, and certainly we've been talking about, we had a debriefing session with all the administrators and the police, and overwhelmingly we agreed that we needed to do a better job with the communication systems, not only with the parents but also among ourselves. In that light, we were looking at some equipment as well as some telephone communications alert systems to parents. We wanted to make sure that we were coordinating with the town. When these things happen, when emergencies occur, most of the time they have to do with the police, so we wanted to make sure that we were coordinating with any efforts that the town wanted to put into place. Chief O'Leary and I have met, I think, 3 times now. He has done a great deal of work. We did a little bit of homework. We had a meeting as of this morning. And I think at that point, Chief, if you'll just get him up to date with where we are on both systems, please.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Norton. Again, thank you for having me here tonight, because this is something that I think is very critical to have input and direction from the school committee. And congratulations, Mr. Harrington,
Thank
on
you very much, Chief.
your election to the chairmanship, and I wish you well.
If you have some suntan lotion, it would help.
Well,
Or I can just use your hat, I guess.
that's right, you can use that. There are 2 different things that I want to address with the committee tonight. The first deals with the emergency radio system that Dr. Norton and I have talked about. Our intent is to craft emergency communication capability for the Foxborough Public Schools that integrates into our town-wide network. Several years ago, when the Ahern School was coming online, members of my staff obtained a specific public safety frequency, and it was our intent at that time to utilize that to provide equipment for the Ahern School. At that time, it was decided to utilize the phone system as the primary source of emergency communication in that particular building, and we have held on to the license, just keeping it so-called in our back pocket, so if an opportunity arose in the future, we could utilize that frequency as part of our town-wide network. And certainly the intent of Dr. Norton is to perhaps utilize that frequency to enhance the emergency communication that her staff members have during an event. In order for the system to function on an optimal level, we also have to include other components besides the mere fact of providing portables. I met several times last week with people that handle our radio system, that's Detective Sergeant John Hannon, as well as Richard Wright, who is the Deputy Director of Emergency Management. Dick's background is in radio technology, and he's been working for the town of Foxborough, taking care of our radio system as far back as prior to my becoming a police officer in 1977. So he has a good handle on what the technology is, and he's providing me with information that I'll be sharing with Dr. Norton on the implementation. One of the key factors is that we would have portable radios in each of our school buildings that could be used by staff administrators. They would have multi-channel capabilities, so on a day-to-day basis, buildings could keep their communication within their own structure that wouldn't bleed out into the community, yet at the same time, we could utilize the area-wide channel, so to speak, when we had a critical situation in the school that would require assistance from other school buildings, from the central office staff, as well as communicating ability with the police department that would be running the operation, or with fire service, depending on the nature of the event that we would have to deal with. The police department has some suggestions in terms of the equipment because of our constant upgrading of our own system, and in terms of a potential cost, I know in an email that Mr. Wright provided me as late as this morning, he felt that a system could be designed and implemented that would provide communication at all our school buildings for just under $30,000. And I know that one of the issues as we come down to the end of the year is there may be some surplus in some accounts, and I think that if we could upgrade our incident communication, it would be beneficial to the staff as well as to the community and our student body. So that is one aspect of emergency communication that would address Dr. Norton's need so that her staff members could interact more effectively when we have one of these incidents occurring within a public school building.
If you, just before you move on to the second part of that, to explain, we have some walkie-talkies in the elementary schools. We've played with some different walkie-talkies at the Ahern School, but there are pockets where we've had difficulty with transmitting. The same thing has happened here at the high school. So Paul's been trying diligently to get the correct material, the right radios to work. During the period that we're talking about, there were 3 radios that the 3 principals had, but nobody else could hear them, and they could only hear one another from 1 to 2. As the police couldn't hear what the administrators were saying, the administrators couldn't hear what the police were saying, they couldn't communicate with them, nor could the superintendent know what was happening throughout the building. And so it was a breakdown in communication. So what we wanted to do was to not only extend the number of radios that we have available in the building to make sure that everybody is hooked up, as well as linking back to central office so they are aware of what is happening, but also making sure that we've got equipment that can be used throughout the building and throughout the district. So that was our goal when I went to talk to Ed. Thanks, Ed.
Can I ask you just two questions on that topic? First of all, Paul, from a capital standpoint, what are the rules as to when we have to go to the capital committee?
Over 25,000.
So because this is proposed at 30, we'd have to go to the capital committee?
Yes.
Okay. And the second question is, have we had the opportunity to review this proposal with the new superintendent and to gather his input?
Not yet, because it just came this morning.
Okay. And obviously you'd be intent to review that with him
Oh,
first before
absolutely.
we would take a vote.
Well, he is aware. I've talked to him about the issues. He knows that I've talked to the chief. He knows that that's what we were reviewing, but I wasn't able to reach him this morning.
Okay. Fine. Go ahead, Chief.
Just a follow-up in the conversations that I had with both Dr. Norton and Mr. Jackson. This is something that could be staged in terms of implementation. We still want to make sure that we get the so-called backbone of the system that involves repeaters that would magnify the ability to communicate within the community itself as well as the building. And it's not just the school department that has buildings that are difficult to transmit and receive in. That happens in other buildings in town, and it's very frustrating as well as dangerous for my staff when they're inside buildings that we don't have that coverage. I know that we're working with the building commissioner to make sure that new buildings that are put up here in Foxborough do have that capability so that we won't have blockages with radio transmissions. And I know that in his conversation, Dick is very well of some of the limitations about construction material, and we're trying to overcome that capability. But I agree that before we would do anything, we would of course need the school department to sign off on it, because you're the actual user of the system. But I want to reiterate that the system we're recommending is based on our experience in public safety communication.
And what's the timeline once the school committee were to give approval or the town were to give approval for you to have the equipment and have it installed and up and running?
We would hopefully have things running so that when we opened in September, we would have implementation.
Right.
That is what I would have as a timetable, because we realize how critical the system can be for the safety of our students.
The reason I was asking that is I was hoping that it would be effective for September 1st, roughly, and then we have to work backwards, because if, for instance, it takes 45 days, then when we count backwards, we know how much time we have before we have to consult, agree, approve, etc. And that I would imagine that the capital committee, we could get together fairly quickly to review this. What I don't want to do, Chief, is be accused of circumventing the 25,000 by saying we'll do part of it this year and part of it next year. I'd rather bring them together as a group fairly quickly, discuss it, and get their blessing. We'll pay for it so it doesn't have to go to town meeting. We'll have the money in our account. I believe Paul has talked about taking it out of one of the revolving accounts. So from a financial standpoint, this is not an issue. But I want to make sure that we're not accused of circumventing policy.
Right.
I just need to know the timeline that it takes from the time you order it to the time you receive it, because we want it for September, and then we can make sure that we have the appropriate discussions with the appropriate people.
And again, it could come out based on the bidding and the analysis of the systems. It could be under the $25,000 threshold. I wanted to make the committee aware of what our best case estimate is at this point in time. We haven't negotiated with any vendors. We're just trying to use current state and federal contracts to take a look at what some of these costs would be.
Right.
And again, Mr. Wright is very conservative because he wants to give you what he believes could be a true picture, and if there are system savings, certainly that would go into effect.
Absolutely. Okay. And the second piece?
The second piece...
Could I ask one other
Sure,
question? Now, Larry, help me. I got Martha. She preferred chairwoman, or chairman. you're chairman, we could address you as Mr. Chairman, or how do you want to?
You can address me as Larry if you'd like.
Well, I would just like to ask what your preference would be. So that
Larry is fine.
if I may. Chief, could you detail the 30,000? And is this so that every teacher and key staff member in each of our 5 buildings will have a portable radio? Or could you detail that just a little bit further?
Well,
Okay. I
Dr.
was going to say, why
Norton,
don't you let me jump in, because it would be our radios. What we were talking about were 3 at the elementary, 5 at the Ahern, 5 at the high school, and 6 at central office, so that all of the major players, including Michael Leary, Paul, superintendent, central office also has it. The nice thing about the system that Ed is talking about is, should, God forbid, we have someone who enters and incapacitates somebody with a radio, we can turn that radio off and continue to use the system. That would be because it would be centered someplace where central office would have access to it. So there are some additional safety factors that are involved in this too, beyond that we don't have with regular walkie-talkies.
Right.
So I'm sorry to jump in, except
No,
that the
I
numbers
appreciate
were
it.
our call, they weren't the chief's call.
Okay. And so the total numbers again are?
Is 25. 25. 25.
When you said 3 at the elementary, did you mean?
3 at each one of the elementaries.
Any other questions on that piece? All right, Chief, you want to go to the next?
yes, when Dr. Norton and I were recapping the lockdown scenario, we started to have a discussion about community alert and notification systems. Information flow is vital in any type of critical incident, and that when people don't have any information at all, there's a tendency to create rumors that take on a life of its own and also appear to be more real than what the real news is. The other issue that you deal with at this point is media frenzy, because now you have the media arriving on site, repeating rumors as opposed to hard facts. And I'll just give an example of last night. We had a call out of an incident on Willow Street. My shift commander activated the regional SWAT team, and within 10 minutes of my arrival on the scene at 1:15, we had a news truck showing up with a reporter and camera crew, hoping that there would be some dynamic type of entry instead of resolving the problem. So these are factors that we're going to deal with whenever we do have some type of situation that develops. And in taking a look, there's a wide variety of telephone notification systems out there. And just to give the committee and the community a little background, myself, the town manager, and the fire chief have actually been in contact with a particular vendor to gather additional information. And one of my roles is to manage the enhanced 911 system, and I feel that to have a community alert system is very vital to the safety of the citizens. So with that information in mind, I've had further conversations with Dr. Norton about the particular needs that the school system has, and some of the systems that they have already started research on. Mr. Jackson has shared some of that information with myself. I've done some additional research. In fact, I'll just, for the purposes, and there are many more names than I'll mention, but as part of our research, Alert Now, Connect Ed, School Reach, Reverse 911, Swift Reach, and Voice Technologies all have various types of packages that are available. And I think it's something that we have to have some additional review before I would feel comfortable, and I don't think Dr. Norton would, before saying that this is a direction we should go in. Unfortunately, what the school's needs are, in particular needs, might not be the best need for a system that would be town-wide in nature, and might not have the necessity that the school department has. So there may be a possibility that we will both have to have our own operating system for different needs. I would hope that I'd be able to get enough information so that we could make one decision, because it would make more sense to have one focal point for community notification. But we're going to continue to work on this project so that we could have a recommendation back to the school committee.
Chief, one of the things that Dr. Norton and I have talked about is the need for a public opportunity for parents to share questions and comments and concerns. I recognize, and I think the school committee recognizes, there are certain questions we can't answer for security purposes, and we cannot go into some of our strategy around security. On the other hand, parents called each member of the school committee, many parents with questions. I know that Janet mentioned this earlier today, that she got a list and she shared it with the principal at the high school. What I would like to do, if you're available at our next meeting, I would like to have a little bit of time where parents can come and ask questions. They can ask questions, and we will maybe not be able to answer all of them because of security reasons, or we may not be able to answer some of them because we don't have the answers. But I think it's important for the citizens, the parents. I heard from people who had children in the elementary school who were concerned because they didn't know what was going on at the high school and it impacted them. And so I think that what I hear people want to hear is they want a lessons learned. They want to debrief with the community as to what are some of the things we've learned. For instance, you've already shared tonight, the communication needs to be improved not only within the buildings, but communications to reach out to parents at work as to what's going on. But there may be other issues that parents want to vet before the school committee, and I think it's important to give them that opportunity. But I do recognize that we will not be able to answer some of their detailed questions. But our next meeting is scheduled for
June 4th.
June 4th. Do you know if you're in town at that point?
I believe I would be.
Because I know you have a vacation coming up
Right.
shortly.
But no, I'll put it on my calendar so
Okay.
that I can make myself available.
Okay, great.
You know, I think any information we get from parents, it helps us improve our operation. However, as you succinctly said, there are some issues that I will not address because I feel that from a security standpoint, I'm not going to share operational plans because I don't want to put anyone else in jeopardy. As a side note, in the next 6 weeks, the entire police staff, including myself, and are going through a training session so that we can have an update on emergency responses, different types of scenarios and different types of buildings, including schools. And also we'll be doing this training in conjunction with other communities, because should we have a critical incident of a significant nature, we will be bringing in, even before, let's say, a more trained response unit, we're going to have to handle that problem initially on our own. And the training is to bring all of the officers up to speed in the latest best practice in this area. So this is something that we're doing this summer at the end of this particular year, and we'll update again as we go through our own in-house training.
Well, Chief, I think it is also, Kate mentioned this at our last meeting, but since you're sitting here tonight, let's share with you personally that the police department was wonderful. And we've talked about the administration. Jeff's here tonight as well. They did a fabulous job. There was a rumor that one of your officers was actually hurt. Any truth to that rumor?
Well, one of the officers that was responding on one of our earlier incidents, it was during a rainstorm, and unfortunately had a slip and fall.
On our wonderful curbing that's going to be replaced this summer. But
and as a result, he has a shoulder injury that's going to require surgery. So I've lost that individual for several months.
And I only mention that because it's important for the parents at home to know that they need to have conversation with their children, that this isn't just fun. This isn't like it was 20 years ago or 10 years ago. People take these issues extremely seriously today, and not only did it impact the students and the teachers and the parents, but we have an officer now that went down, was injured, is going to have surgery, and this is just very serious stuff.
Oh, very definitely. And you know, my staff, when we respond to calls in the school buildings, we do take it seriously because we know that the risks are so high in light of other things that go on in our society.
Questions from the committee at this point?
Chief, if just so that I am sure I'm absolutely clear, it could be as high as $30,000 for 25 walkie-talkies? Is that
Well,
what we're-
it's-
or does
it's-
that also include the
It's not just the walkie-talkies, Ms. Kaminsky, it's also the backbone to the system that would include repeaters and
So it's the
I'll probably...
upgrade for all of
Right,
that.
it's a much more robust system. So the walkie-talkies are the end piece that staff members will use, but I wouldn't advocate investing in the walkie-talkies if you don't get
the wiring
the
and
key
everything else to make
piece
sure that they
in
work?
terms of the frequency transmission enhancements, because then we won't be getting the best value for the investment.
Thank you for
And then there's a
clarifying.
separate cost over and above that for the communication that would go back to parents. Is that correct?
Yes, this would be an entirely different system that we would select that would provide us with the best services at the most reasonable cost. Another thing that had come up, I do a small news group here in the community, and I get excellent feedback from people that read my little notes about what happens in the town. And one of the suggestions from some parents was that we also try and develop an email alert system, because so many more people, other than myself, are much more used to using emails and instant messaging as a method of exchanging information. And I think we would have parent volunteers in the community. I know they have contacted me, and Dr. Norton and I had a very brief discussion about it as to how we would implement that. But that is something also that we could work on that would give us another modality, so to speak, on notifying people.
It would be probably helpful. The reason why I would like to have the public discussion is I believe there are probably some parents that have some ideas on how we could better communicate with people, parents, custodians, etc. And to have that dialogue, they might help by coming to the table and being part of a group to help us think through what's the best way, the most efficient way, the most effective way to communicate to a wider audience when there is an event or a crisis or an issue. And I think that we've got lots of people that live in Foxborough that are professionals in lots of different topics, and I think having it open to discussion will bring some of those parents forward, and maybe they'll help us come up with some better ideas on how to deal with that.
As far as the money issue goes, I think people need to understand that even though we probably will have some sort of a surplus, because we're not going to be able to encumber that money because we have to go to probably CIP if it reaches a certain amount, that we will have to look within our revolving. So I don't want people to say, well, why aren't you using the surplus? We would have to have a purchase order by a certain date in order to use that money. So just people be mindful of the fact that we're going to have to look someplace else for this.
And Paul, you've already had a conversation with Randy to start this discussion.
Yes, sir.
And so we're already working behind the scenes with all of the people that would have to approve this in making sure that there's a robust discussion and there's an appropriate following policy from that standpoint. So by using the revolving account, if by the time we make the decision it's July 8th, we don't have to worry that we've missed the end of the fiscal year. And Randy has already approved that out of the building rental account, for instance, is where we might be able to fund the appropriate emergency communication information that we might need. So we're not constrained to making a decision by a certain date and then saying, gee, I wish we had more time to make a better decision. We have the time to make the right decision for Foxborough, include the right people in that dialogue, and then fund it out of the building rental account.
If I may, Larry, Chief, could you also share with us, you mentioned that it could be one system, it may be two for the idea of the notification. You've been working for quite some time on the community, the town side. Do you have a timeline of when that might be done? Because my question is, we do have some idea of what our needs are. They may be different from some of the community needs, but do we know what the timeline for both? Because perhaps, is there some synergy in putting money into one system versus money into two separate systems?
Well, again, we want to have a system that meets both our needs. I was looking at to be very honest with you, a very simplistic system that doesn't need a lot of input or maintenance, because our calls are ordinarily going to be emergency service based. For example, several months ago we utilized another network to call people in a particular geographic area when we had a missing person that had some disabilities.
That was reverse 911,
Right,
wasn't it? And that worked very well.
Well, it was through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Because of contacts we have, they were able to make that call out. We don't have a contract with that company, but because they felt, as we did, that that person was at risk even though he was not a child, because of his disability, they felt that it would be appropriate so that we could notify people in a particular geographic region. That's what myself and the fire chief would like to have, besides the general community notifications, also to be able to target geographic areas, precincts, when something that's unique to that area or zone or street, to alert people in that area. And, just some of the things we want to make sure that a system that we have has caller ID differentiation, so that if you've got a general call in, if it's not a marking that shows that it's an emergency, you may or may not respond to it. We want to make sure that there's an 800 number with any system we select that people could call back if they only heard part of the message because of a problem with their answering machine or message machine, to call back if need be to get additional data for information behind the thing. And we want to make sure that there's consistent call retries on non-answered calls. Most of the systems do have those components, but again, it's going to take a little more study. My hope, before we started to be more, not exclusive of the schools, because I would be, on the town-wide system, we were going to include the schools for different things that they had needs on, but I'm also trying to use money that I have within my own budget to get the town-wide system initially. If we go to a larger system, I have to share with you, I do not have that financial capability.
And we're more than willing to pay our piece.
Oh, and I have no doubt of that, sir. But I'm hoping to get something in place prior to July 1st with regard to this component.
Chief, is there any Homeland Security grant or programs that are helping seasoned towns to update programs?
There's a variety of grants that communities can apply for. Very often they're targeted to certain geographic areas that are perceived to have greater needs.
There's several grants that are floating around right now because everybody's redoing crisis plans because of the pandemic, flu, questions that everybody has and the plans that we have to update. Understand that beyond what the chief was talking about as far as the schools were concerned, we would be talking about, of course, snow days, school cancellations. We would also be talking about the boiler is shut down at the Taylor School, so we've moved all the children to the Ahern School and notifying the parents that the children have moved. Some of the programs that are available go as far as automatically calling whatever telephone numbers that you want to notify of absences. So they call you on your cell phone and home, et cetera. And that frees up some of our secretaries who are doing that currently. Some of them continue on with a classroom teacher can send home a voice message that says, I'm so glad that you're going to be in my class this year. I can't wait to see you on the first day of school Thursday. I mean, it extends beyond and beyond. So there's any number of things, including meeting announcements to say there will be a meeting for on drug and alcohol in next month, and then a follow-up message that says, don't forget that meeting is tomorrow. You just need to decide how many telephone calls you want to have and what it is that you're going to support. The program that the chief is looking at has a charge per phone call that is made. Some of the other programs are flat rates. So there's just reiterating what the chief is saying, there's a great deal more to this conversation about what are all the services that we think are necessary. How many telephone calls do you really want to get at home? And what's the best way to coordinate that with the town, or finally decide you're going to go to two different programs. So it's a little bit more complicated than it looks on the future.
So who's working with the chief on that piece from the school side? You
Paul
and
and I are.
Okay.
So would it be reasonable to be able to, in addition to the discussion you mentioned, Larry, for our next meeting, would there be an opportunity to perhaps have more information and discussion as to what we see our requirements are?
I would think so, and I would think that by then, because another couple of weeks, they might also have some rough prices, option A, B, and C, here's what they offer, and here's what the cost might be, so we can have a robust discussion. I'll try to make sure that, because security is so important to all of us, I'll try to make sure that we carve out a fair amount of time on that agenda so we can have that discussion. Parents can have the input, and we can work through it, and then decide the appropriate course of action from there.
Certainly like to hear from any of the school committee as well as anyone else. Send me an email, drop me a note. Here's some things that I really think we ought to consider, so that as we're going through, the chief listed 6 different places. There's lots of different companies, different things that you think are really important for us to be sure to look at, so that we don't pass over something when we come to the meeting. We have the information that you're looking for.
And any parent that would have questions, you would like them to email you at?
Absolutely. nortonj@foxborough.k12.ma.us. But you can find us on the website.
Okay. Any other committee questions? Any questions from anyone in the audience on this topic? All right. The next item on the agenda is the school calendar. But
Thanks,
since
Chief.
Jeff's here,
Appreciate your help.
and Jeff has a long commute. Jeff, would you like us to do the student discipline discussion now?
No, it's fine.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we want to be.
You're a soldier.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the 2007-2008 school calendar.
I have submitted the recommendation for the school calendar. I need if you'd like to have some discussion, but also a vote to accept it. In addition to the calendar that you have received, I'd like to propose that that you accept an early release for all students. Primarily this affects the elementary school for this last school day of this year. We didn't take any snow days. We have, in a minute, Mr. Jackson's going to talk to you about asbestos and tile replacements, et cetera, which means that teachers need to get out of their classrooms, get themselves moved out, gives them a little bit more time. So I'd like to recommend, in addition to this calendar, the idea that we would accept an early release last day.
Discussions from the committee on the calendar? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the calendar.
I'll second that.
Along with the early dismissal for
I
this
was
year?
just going to say, along with the early.
Motion by Martha, second by Debbie. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, the next item on the agenda is the district improvement plan. And what I'd like to do, before we turn it over to Dr. Norton, I'd like to add a few comments. First of all, I want to thank the very many constituents who came together over the last year to work together, first on the strategic plan, and give us all their feedback on that program, which is what led to the DIP and ultimately going to lead to the school improvement plans. During that process, parents raised lots of questions about performance within our schools over the last decade. They demanded more visibility of data. They demanded more accountability by the administration. They wanted measurable goals and objectives. And they wanted a candid, honest assessment of where we did well and where we didn't do well. I hope that Kate will agree with me, as we both served on the strategic planning process as well as the DIP subcommittee, when I say that administration listened to the constituents and worked hard to develop the long overdue DIP that addresses student needs in a very meaningful way, while holding students and parents, teachers, administration, and the school committee accountable. We do not have a DIP that will be cast in concrete. We have a DIP that will be ongoing. This particular DIP, lots of effort has gone into it. I think that administration would admit it's not perfect, no first document is, but it will be reviewed on a quarterly basis, and so it's a living document that can be updated. So we don't have to necessarily argue about certain words or other things. Over the next couple of quarters, we'll continue to evolve this plan. But I wanted to give the community, many of whom may not have seen the draft DIP yet, an example of the data, the accountability, and the measurable goals that are in the DIP. And so if those that are here tonight would turn to the section on math, I think that's fairly representative of all the topics that we have there. And if you...
Is that page 9, Larry?
It's on page 9, yes. And if you're looking at that, and it is out on the web, so anybody that wants to download it from the web, they can. But on page 9, what they've done is they've established targets for CPI improvement goals for every year. So they show you where we are in 2005, 2006, 2006, 2007, and our targets for 2008, 2009, and 2010. Not only do they show you targets by year, but they actually break it out by area of population. They break it out by special ed, by low income, by African American, by Asian, by Hispanic, and by white. They include the number of students and what we expect in terms of progress for each of those groups in each of those years. Further, if you go below that chart, it really, if you look at the last two sentences of the first paragraph, it says, however, aggregate scores at grades 3 and 5 were relatively lower than in other grade levels, indicating the scope and sequence of instruction at these grade levels needs to be reevaluated. A candid assessment of where our problems are, no sugarcoating. And again, if you turn to page 10, the first paragraph, of concern are the rising warning and failure scores in grades 4 and 6. Grade 4 warning scores increased from 3% in 2004 to 7% in 2006. Grade 6 warning scores increased from 11% in 2004 to 15% in 2006. Also, grades 6 and 8, although performing above the state, do not show consistent improvement in any areas. Students demonstrate the lowest achievement in the areas of fractions, decimals, percents, the reading and use of the number line, and early linear relationship concepts. Grades 5 and 7 have unacceptably high warning levels, indicating an inconsistently implemented program because these scores differ from grades 6 and 8. The poor results of our grades 3 and 5 math scores indicate our program does not adequately meet the needs, the demands of the frameworks. Terra Nova scores confirm weaknesses in math computation, open response, and problem solving. Each school improvement plan will address these items. So the point is that not only do we have criteria to measure progress year by year, category by category, but you have a clear, honest assessment of where our weaknesses are. As Dr. Norton and her team pointed out earlier this year, we had curriculum cycles that had not been updated in a very, very long period of time. We talked last meeting about our math program had a book that was obsolete 9 years ago. This committee has approved a curriculum cycle. We have funded a new ELA program, a new math program. We will then go through science and history and all the other programs on a regular basis according to the cycle. When you update English, it will be a few more years when you'll be back looking at English again. And so I want to commend the administration for listening to the frustration of the parents who felt we weren't always being as candid as we could. It is as candid as you can get in here. Parents who thought we didn't have measurable goals and objectives, they're here now. And the school improvement plans will further take these district-wide goals and identify the specific implementation plans in order to make this accountable. And the idea is that once a quarter, the school committee would get an update from the administration on the progress we're making against these plans, and on an annual basis, we'll be able to measure how effective we were at reaching our annual goals and objectives. And so I know that Dr. Norton and her team will probably not want to say these kinds of things, but I think they've done a really marvelous job. They've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours putting this together, and it's easy to nitpick words or sentences or phrases, but the bottom line is it's an ongoing living document that will constantly be updated and constantly changed, as we move forward from quarter to quarter. Kate, did you want to add anything else?
I think you make very valid points, and again, I'd like to add, not just the time that the community members did, but our administrative staff. I particularly have to, again, thank Dr. Norton, because not only did she put in countless hours, but then she had to put in countless hours to work with Larry and myself. And we basically sent her pages and pages of notes, and she was always very patient with us, very clear. And I think, as Larry pointed out, we not only have, we have both a format and we have content that is clear and consistent. And in working with Dr. Norton, we've added things. We've got the curriculum review cycle that's there. Very specific objectives and goals are put under each of these items. So I think, as Larry already mentioned, accountability, that's very important. I'd also like to just mention the breadth and depth. Larry was giving all kinds of suggestions, as was I, and some of the other things I'd like to highlight that as a result of that are included into this plan. We didn't just talk about student retention. We wanted to make sure, because we have a value and a commitment to that, that we also, a piece was added on staff retention as well. We were able to, for instance, under respect, look and make sure there's a point added, continue to provide the college and career counseling to all of our students. We, under technology, we want to increase the use of both email and websites and publish phone lists for each of our school to continue to enhance the skills of our teachers. You'll see items added under professional development. I think it's not just specific, it's very strategic also in terms of looking system-wide. Lastly, I'd just like to also mention that, again, under technology, we wanted to look at ways to improve and upgrade our phone system district-wide and improve the efficiency, reduce costs, and improve communications. And that was all added prior to the emergency situation we saw at lockdown, as a result of the lockdown. So I think it's a very comprehensive, I think it's very objective, and yet it's very comprehensive, it's specific, and I think it will serve our needs very well.
Dr. Norton, did you want to add anything else?
Oh, please. Again, thanks to the strategic planning committee that worked tirelessly for the last year and a half. In this past year, we've let them take a rest and turn to department heads and the administrators to come up with more specific data. I have been assured by several superintendents and other organizations that this is the largest district improvement plan in the state. But as Kate said, we wanted to make sure that this was comprehensive and all questions were answered. So I applaud the idea that this is, if we look at it, it's a snapshot in time. This is what we know now. We're saying it's a 5-year plan, but it's created a foundation. Written into this district improvement plan, we've established that it will be reviewed quarterly. So there'll be a report on this quarterly. How are we doing on what we said we were going to do? And it will be evaluated in December of every year. Those are very important parts, so that as you see some things and you're saying, I don't know, that number has changed. If you had a communication system in here and you put it down for $50,000 and it turned out to be XYZ, understand that this is going to be continuously reviewed. The numbers will change. I've put the year 2006, 2011 on it as a 5-year plan because even in its draft stage, there are many of the things that we've written in the plan for you to take a look at and say, oh, we did that. Because we have been working from this as a draft throughout the school year. I've had some people who have commented on what we have put up on the website. First of all, I'm going to personally apologize for the floating charts. Wendy will be the first person who's going to tell you there's no way on earth anyone is ever going to hire me as a secretary. However, I typed all of this either on my computer here or at home, and so some of the charts, once they went to a PDF file format, floated it a little bit. As you see, they look very nice on a flat sheet of paper, but they didn't translate. And again, hire a secretary. I'm sure somebody can take care of that. I apologize for those of you that it was difficult to read. I've had some questions that talking about the headings have changed. There are 4 core values. The district improvement plan is written based on those 4 core values. That was the decision of the strategic planning committee, and also suggestions that came through all of the surveys, et cetera, that we had. The first one, the 4 core values spell out care. Interestingly enough, the first one starts with a C, but it's referring to academics. And that's what we're all about. So that's the most important. So when you look in the district improvement plan, it is the bulk of the district improvement plan. It also has the most categories. Who is responsible for this? What's the assessment? What are the tools? What are the timelines with the assessment instrument? Because it is the most important part of your district improvement plan. As you move through the other 3 area core values, you'll see that the second one is talking about the environment. The third one is talking about respect programs. The fourth one is communication and collaboration. Because they don't have all the different tools for assessment, the numerous people who are responsible for it, and they are more setting up timelines for expenses, the headings decrease. That is typical of district improvement plans everywhere, and it's certainly a plan that we work through with Dr. Ladd from BC, who has been helping us all along. It's time to put this out for everybody to see. It's time to take it out and give it a test ride. We started writing this, of course, last spring. We played with it in the fall, gave copies of it to Larry and Kate, the administrators. Department heads got involved. They kind of changed their information. We kept changing it, and what's happened is it's got bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think that it's time to take it as it is, take it out for a rough spin, see what happens with it. I do have some assurances to people who were kind enough to send me comments besides the floating charts, but also people that were asking about where the root causes. We do not have root causes in the district improvement plan. The root causes are specific to the schools. So you will find the root causes by the school in each one of the school improvement plans. You also, people are asking for some specific, what will the high school do in regards to this? What will the elementary school do in regards to this? Again, the specific data and the specific how you will carry out the district improvement plan will be in the school improvement plans. They are much more specific than the district improvement plan. Primarily, as you look at the academic piece, what you see is, again, my compliments again to the school committee for adopting a curriculum cycle, but what you see is that cycle work through each one of the subjects. So you'll know what will be happening as each year, so it's not just once every 8 years here we come, but what happens in the process, how things are reviewed, how things are reevaluated. So that's what the district improvement plan looks like. That is not the same data that will be in the the district improvement plans. It's not the same that will be in the school improvement plans. They will be speaking more specifically to the targets and the goals. So I'd love to open up to some questions. I think we have some people in the audience who had some
Well, let me
questions.
start
That
with
would be all
committee
right.
members' questions,
That'd
and
be
I'll
great.
take questions from the audience.
Sure.
Yeah, I have several questions. I want to compliment, I don't want to reiterate what everybody is saying, but I will echo what's already been said by Larry and Kate. Just a couple of questions. One of the things that I noticed, like if you look on page 15, when on the desired level of performances, what I noticed looking through the DIP was that when it was stated demonstrated steady improvement on SATs on number 4. I guess one thing that seems a little bit unclear is what that means exactly, demonstrated steady improvement. There's not a quantifiable number associated with that. And I was just wondering why. I know that clearly in the MCAS there's certain numbers associated with obviously the improvements with the CPI, but I'm just wondering why it wasn't done for SAT improvements.
You have, sure, No Child Left Behind gives us specific goals.
Right.
That's the CPI that you see in there, and I've put all the calculations in there. Understand with SATs, for example, the SAT tests are changing, so it's very difficult right now to establish what will the changes be. But as Jeff and his staff have told you, our average score is a 3. So the steady, what I would suggest to you is each year take a look at it, and what you should see is that there's a steady progress. You're going from an average of 3 to an average of 4 to an average of 5, or more students getting a 3 than we're getting a 4. But because your population is going to change and your tests are changing, it's very difficult to say specifically what it would be, what it should be. You'd be shooting for more than, higher than an average of 3. So that's why it says it's a very general statement.
That's for the AP, but I'm talking.
I'm sorry, I did say AP.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, and then on the SAT would be the same thing. What I was saying is the SAT tests are changing.
Too.
I tripped over the two of them.
Okay, the other thing too was in a lot of the, again, talking about mastery, like on page 19. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's not on that page. Well, one other thing was, okay, we'll just look at page 19, this is something different, but expanding the availability of online resources and materials. Again, trying, again, with the movement to really put this in quantifiable levels of performance, it's described steady increase in participation rates, increase in number of available tools. And again, I don't know if we want to be more specific about that number. Again, how we define what a steady increase in participation rates are. What is an increased number of available tools? It's very general. And again, because other areas are more specific, I was just wondering why those weren't.
Just don't have the specific numbers, nor did we feel comfortable projecting. Not right now. It might be something that, as you review this quarterly, take a look at your numbers and see, are you seeing a steady progress, and then you might be able to establish better numbers. I don't have firm enough numbers to, I could say, 100% participation rate, but I think you need to be reasonable also.
We need a baseline to begin with in some cases.
And I don't have it.
Well, that's just because I think somebody reading this will wonder why there are certain areas.
Because some places I have it and other places I don't.
Everyone understand it.
On page 12, when we talk again about strategy number 7, we're saying 80% of students achieving mastery on the local benchmark test.
Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't the one. It was where we were doing benchmark testing. We were developing our own benchmark assessments within the curriculum. Again, I'm just wondering again how you came up with 80%, or was there?
Those are targets. 80%. What we're talking about is taking into consideration different levels of students, different levels of courses.
Is that?
And 80% is pretty much what you would say. We're moving forward with the curriculum. 80% of the students got it. The other 20% we would be talking about tutoring or something else to that effect. So you shoot for we're shooting for 80%.
All right, because you did that again on page 19, which was under number 6 again.
Yes.
That was the benchmark assessment for each grade level, and again the 80%. And again, people may wonder, why isn't it 100%? Why isn't it 90%? What's realistic about 80%?
Well,
So,
as I said,
again,
it's the different levels of students and the different course levels. At 80% also you move forward with the curriculum rather than holding everybody back.
Another question that I had was regarding science on page 21. I'm sorry, 27. Okay, the class of 2010 will have to pass the MCAS biology as a graduation requirement.
Correct.
And listed on page 827, number 8, you have providing an MCAS science course. The timeline for that is fall 2009. Okay, I'm wondering why that was designated as the timeline, because that class of 2010 will be graduating in that summer, or in that June of the following year. And I'm wondering what's going to happen to those kids that don't pass the MCAS biology, and if they're receiving a course or they're taking a course in the fall of 2009, how that's going to provide what they need in order to ensure that they're passing
I think
that
what this
biology.
says is by the fall of 2009, she'll have demonstrated 100% proficiency. So obviously, they'll start it before then, but that's when she's going to hold herself accountable for being at 100%. But it will
That's what
start,
you're holding it- oh,
it'll
okay,
start
okay, it
before the
wasn't
fall
clear
of
to me, okay.
2009.
Because
Okay, that wasn't
you see
clear.
the salaries that were already coming in. So.
You have the salary listed.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the implementation, it's actually when it will be,
She's agreeing
into
with you by the
place.
fall
Okay,
of 2009, we better be at 100%, or we're going to have an issue with some of the
okay,
students.
okay, all right. On page 46, this is regarding the full-day kindergarten that's discussed. I'm just wondering if you could give us an update on where we're at with that, with the...
What are you talking about, the kindergarten grant?
Yeah, providing all the kindergarten.
That is something that Dr. Marches and I are talking about. That is a grant that comes up in October. There is I just was noticing today that funds have increased for that. But that is a grant that Dr. Alardi has been working on. However, it is the responsibility of the assistant superintendent. Dr. Martis has not chosen an assistant superintendent. He is aware of a due date. So some of the pieces have started. It's just a matter of when he's going to move forward with it and who he's going to have be in charge of that.
When we were in at the State House for the MASC conference, I had a meeting with Pat Haddett, who's the chairman of the Education Committee. And one of the things we talked about was the grant funding for kindergarten. And she pointed out that there was a fair amount of money available and that a lot of people didn't take advantage of it. And I said probably one of the reasons was it was a 2-year grant. And considering the fiscal restraints in a lot of cities and towns, I said that if there's that kind of money available, if people haven't used it, maybe they should consider opting to have 3-year grants, because I think that would be much more palatable to put in. Eventually, everybody's going to have full-day kindergarten. I mean, there's no way to get around it. But I think to make it a little bit more palatable to the cities and towns, if somehow they could extend that grant for a 3-year, because hopefully in 3 to 4 years, most of the cities and towns might be in a better light. So she actually wrote it down and said it was something that she would take back to the committee. So I think it would help, because a lot of people really hesitate to get into a 2-year grant.
Yeah,
There's not much wiggle room with 2 years.
The grant is not for, it's a grant that comes up in October, so it's not for starting all year round kindergarten in October. It's to start getting things in place. But there are additional expenses to the district that the district needs to be planning for and deciding, when are you going to be implementing. Martha's absolutely right. There is no question all-day kindergarten is going to be mandated here very, very, very soon.
So take advantage of it.
Yeah,
of a
so
2-year
what we
grant,
want to
but
do is,
hopefully
and
it's a
that's the
3-year.
reason why it's written into the DIP. Certainly want to take advantage of it so that there is some funding along the way. It's just you're having a turnover in administration, and so some of the legwork has been done, but this is something that needs to be passed to the next superintendent.
Would you clarify for me? So the deadline to file is October?
Yes.
And we've done some of the pieces, but it's not finalized.
That's correct.
And we have to
Some of the
meet with
committees,
the deadline.
the grant is very involved with a number of people, which people, how often they have to meet, exactly what do they have to discuss, what are the outcomes from them, some survey of information. Dr. Alardi has already done, working with Paul, done some of the numbers on buses and materials and classrooms and teachers and those kinds of things. But exactly, what the go-forward plan is, again, the foundation is set. There is time until October to get the grant written. the best thing to do at this point. As I said, I've talked to Dr. Martis several times on this issue, and we'll pick it right up as soon as he comes on or makes a choice on the assistant superintendent.
One of the other things that Paul has already done is he's calculated for each one of our schools what's the current student enrollment and what's the capacity in that building. And so what he's looked for instance, if you have 2 half-day kindergartens become a full day, well, then you need additional classrooms in order to account for all the children. So Paul has actually been working through, and as we work through this McGuire group, we have capacity in our school buildings today. We have a meeting coming up where we've invited someone from the planning board to come and talk to us about the development in town. We also have to take into consideration the impact on the schools to go with a full-day kindergarten. And so while we've said earlier that under the guidelines the state has today, to get reimbursement for the $13 or $14 million for the high school alone, never mind some of the other capital at the other schools, we don't really qualify under the terms. However, by bringing in full-day kindergarten, that could be something that adds to our case for why we need some additional capital for our schools. So I think it helps that Paul has done the analysis at 20 children per classroom, 25 children, and 30 children per classroom. What is the maximum capacity in each of those buildings compared to what we have today? So when we actually sit down and talk that evening with the planning board, Paul is going to present to the school committee what is the current number of students in the classroom and what would be the theoretical capacity of that building, so the public and members of the committee will know how much room we have to grow. Because if either through the full-day kindergarten, through new homes being built in town, et cetera, we'll need enough lead time to deal with that. This will give us some good information to tell us how much lead time we have.
There's some other options too. I mean, we do have a preschool program, and if that would be, you might want to bring the preschool children to the high school. It's done in other districts, and then provide some child care courses for the high school students. And of course, that changes the curriculum at the high school. There's many different options to consider, and that's another thing that this kindergarten grant would give you a chance to take a look at.
I guess I was also just wondering how competitive the grants are in terms of competing with other towns that want that same grant.
Well, everyone is having the same conversation that we are having, knowing that kindergarten is on its way.
Right.
So what it amounts to is write a good grant. As Larry pointed out, you've not been excluded from it. There's we do have. You don't have a full-day kindergarten already. You have half-day kindergarten. It's going to be how well the grant is written. You've not the RFP does not exclude Foxborough at this point. Sometimes on some of the grants that the school committee asks about, why don't we go for this grant or why don't we go for that grant? We get excluded from it because, for example, your MCAS scores have been good. You get excluded from it because your SAT scores have been good. You get excluded from it because the roof isn't falling in. Your buildings are in fair condition. So, you've done a good job. Things are looking good. So you don't move to the front of the list for some grants, but the RFP for the kindergarten grant does not exclude Foxborough.
Well, the other thing is the fact that they turned back money or had money still left over last year because people didn't apply for it. Katie is in our favor, so that obviously if somebody put their name in and it was, something they wanted to fund, the money's there.
Right.
So.
Paul, when we have the meeting at the next meeting when we talk about the McGuire group and the study, would you please make sure you invite Representative Barrows and Senator Timilty to attend the meeting? I don't know whether they can or they'll send a representative, but I think it's important for them to hear the needs that we have, the criteria the state has, and that they'd be there to advocate for us. So let's make sure when that's on the agenda that they're notified in advance and asked to attend. Katie, do you have any other questions?
No, thank you.
Beverly?
Thank you for the tremendous amount of work that has gone into this.
My pleasure.
Horrendous or tremendous?
Both.
Both. I've gone to almost to tears a couple of times.
Both.
Martha, comments?
I think what's important here is this is a very honest, upfront interpretation of what's going on in the system, and I applaud your candor and the fact that nothing is sugar-coated. I think what's important is when people look at this and they look at the title strategies assessment instrument, assessment schedule, person responsible, and resource allocation. I think it lends credibility to the budget process and what we need in order to move the system forward. I mean, if you want to stay where you are, and you don't want to move forward, and you don't want to invest the money that it's going to take to turn something like this around, then, shame on us. But I think this lends a lot of credibility to the community, because there's a lot of people who say, okay, we're doing okay, but we can do better. And I think that's what this committee should be advocating for. And I think this district improvement plan really spells it out for all of us and for the community. So I think it has a lot of credibility. And Jan, I can't thank you enough, because I like the fact that it's not sugar-coated. It tells it like it is, and I think people will appreciate that.
Questions from anyone in the audience? Would you please come to the front and introduce yourself?
Judy Baumiller. This is not leisure reading at 62 pages,
No, it
so
isn't.
I have not had a chance to sink my teeth into this, but I just have a couple of big picture questions. On page 9, where it goes, it gives one example of the table for targets for each school year. Will we be seeing target versus actual at some point, rather than having that fall off? That would be something that would be helpful
Sure,
for us as a...
That wouldn't necessarily have to be a part of that quarterly review as to get the numbers.
Right.
You'll have your new numbers in about October, so it'll shift the targets, and you'll be able to write those in.
So the actuals will be staying there?
This one starts with the actuals, and then it moves forward with the projected. So
Right, I just didn't want to lose that, because I
No.
think that will be helpful for us to see
That's
as
the
a general
key to
public.
I
I think
I know that will be part of the
you can
conversation.
definitely expect that.
For the people who will be reviewing it, but the rest of us would like to see that too. Another part of the more big picture for maintenance, an example would be page 15, where it goes through the different timelines for expected dates. I noticed that, this is just one example, but I noticed that they're not necessarily in sequential order. So how is this document going to change as a moving document if, say, we lose item number 6, but we would still have 5 and 7? Does everything get renumbered, or does it make sense at some point to put these in some sequential order so that they fall off of the top of the list? Is it?
That one fell out of order. If you take, I'm sorry, if you take a look at each one of the subjects, the 4 core subjects, they're part of the curriculum cycle. Actually, they're all part of the curriculum cycle being reviewed, and what happens during the review process and the evaluation process. This one, the number 6 fell in because this year the school committee already accepted a new hired math teacher. So all of a sudden it came in spring 2007. That's because the date when we're bringing this document forward. So it would have said, as the review, at the end of the review, the 7-12 review, add another high school math teacher, perhaps. But because the committee has already seen the need for a math teacher, we just plugged it right on in there.
So
it's
as
already
this
coming up
document
now.
moves forward, what happens to the sequencing? Does
Well,
it,
let me
everything
just
gets
say,
renumbered?
What I would expect is that when we start to review this, there'll be some additional columns to the right, which will say status, and you'll know clearly what the status is, and so it might say done next to that one.
Right.
Right?
So-
And
But
then-
at some point,
and then at
62
some point,
pages is
when
going
it's
to end up
done-
being 82.
Right, when it's done, it will drop off after the next cycle, and they will be renumbered at that point.
And
You
you're
won't
call-
keep the ones that are done on there forever, you'll move them off.
And are you calling this cycle the quarterly review or an annual review?
Um,
What are you calling them?
Well, I would say once a year, when this gets a total update, those that were completed in the cycle and agreed to were completed in the cycle would come off in the next plan, and then the renumbering would happen. But during the 4 quarters, what I would anticipate you would see a status column on the far right on each of these that we have updated information on, so that we can have a discussion and allow people to understand, where are we on number 4, 5, 6, 7, et cetera.
Right, because it's expected to change. I just didn't know how
Right.
how the picture was going to
Yeah.
change. Getting back to one of the things that I had heard the quarterly review, and I had heard reviewed in December.
Each year.
So can you tell us what happens now? When are we going to when is this going to be addressed again? When is the public going to see it? What happens now? Is the next time that we're going to see
There'll be a
this
quarterly
document in December?
There'll be a quarterly review that you'll have your superintendent will say, here are the things that we've been able to accomplish. Go through the plan and say, we did 4 on number 15, on page 15, we did 7 on number 15.
Right.
Any questions that the committee should have, well, what's the status on thus and such? That'll be
So I
conversation.
guess my question is, when is the end of the quarter? What do we call it? What are we calling quarters? Are we starting in September?
Well, we're going to have to wait for the new superintendent to start, because obviously it's not fair to put this on
Give
a
him a
quarterly
time.
cycle. We need to give him some time. So what I would envision is the committee would give approval to this document. It would now become the living document that would change. When Dr. Martis comes in, we'll be meeting with him in a workshop between him and his administration and the school committee to establish goals and objectives for him, for his direct reports, for the school committee, et cetera. And over the first few months, he'll be then working to try to understand all of this stuff. So it would seem to me that we will probably start the cycle in December when he's had a few months to really understand this, get to know who his staff is, work with them, and be able to give us the first update in December, along with what changes he would recommend after being on board for 5 or 6 months with the community. And then after that, I would expect on a quarterly basis, the end of March, early April, et cetera, that we would have updates. But I think we have to give him, that first few months to kind of get.
Sure,
his
I had
feet
just
wet.
heard quarterly, didn't know what that meant.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And any additional thoughts can be directed to Jan?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. All questions can go directly to Jan. They can pass me. Right, Jan?
Trust me, I know it intimately, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. As Kate said, we went through page by page. My ears were burning for an entire day as somebody was going through my comments.
I won't tell you what I said.
I know. I have a little birdies. Any other comments from anyone in the audience? Deb, you want to come forward?
Thank you. Deb Navedo from Spruce Street again, and thank you for allowing me to come back. I also respect this as a draft, having done kind of a major draft recently too. I recognize that it's a work in progress, and I respect that it takes a lot of courage to, as you say, take it for a test drive. That once you put it out there for the public to look at, then every little line starts to get looked at, and the period's in the wrong place, and you're missing a comma, and that's not the stage we're at. We really shouldn't be doing that to what you've presented here. So I had just a couple of questions and I guess comments too about the big picture issues, as Ginny is saying too. I really appreciated the fact that there was a definitions page included, and I wanted to ask whether or not these definitions were given to us from the state, or
Some of them are absolutely lifted right off state documents.
Okay. Because there were some definitions that I thought, they don't quite match the rest of the document, and I thought maybe some additional description would be helpful so that it matches the rest of the document. And I'm happy to send you my comments on that. But I did want to say that I really did appreciate that there was a definitions page in here, because as a member of the public, I think that's where we all have to start, is that we understand the core values, and then we're going to understand the language we're going to use to discuss the core values. So thank you very much. Okay. In terms of, and beg your pardon, here we are, big picture. A lot of what's written in here is required, either through No Child Left Behind or through Department of Education regulations and such, and there are no references in here. Now, I recognize that that's also a huge task if you start referencing, but I think it would help the rest of us that if at some point it's possible to have some of those additional references included, then it would allow us to not only have a more informed conversation with you and not have you teach us all the big picture stuff, but we can do some homework on our own. So I thought that might be a little bit helpful somewhere down the road. In terms of definitions, the CPI and the PI were not differentiated in the list. Perhaps that would be helpful to be included in the two. But the one thing I did want to bring to the committee and to the administration was more of a outcomes measurement issue. And that is that in academics we have tests, we have MCAS, we have SATs, we have AP scores, we have Terra Novas at the younger age groups. And so we have measurements that we're fairly comfortable with. But then when we get down to our other core values like respect, how do you measure respect? That's not a quick and easy, okay, now we have a respect of a 9 out of a 10-point scale. There's no instrument like that. So I did notice that the measurements that were listed for the time being are reports of discipline reports or things like that. And I wanted to challenge the committee as well as the administration to kind of take another look at that, even though we may not be able to come up with a numerical value. Can we truly be comfortable with respect as measured as a lack of discipline issues? Or can we have some other way of defining respect in a positive manner of so much various other activities or programs that the students participated in? I don't know what would be the proper answer because it's really not a clear thing. But not to focus only on discipline issues as a form of showing that, yes, we have respect for each other, but have other mechanisms as well that we can look at and have positive feedback. And parent surveys, teacher surveys are important, but just to kind of rethink what is it that we're trying to do in terms of our own community culture in terms of respect.
Jan, what we may want to do to make it easier is as you transition to Dr. Martis, based on all the work that you've done on this and based on some conversations you and I have had about the changes that may or may not have to be made here, we should probably give Dr. Martis a list of these kinds of comments and questions. I don't want to, as one member, hold up the showcasing this around town and giving people an opportunity to critique it. So I'm hoping that the committee tonight will approve the draft, and let's start gathering those questions. And when he comes and you're transitioning to him, allow him to have that same input that the citizens had or school committee members had, and let him, as he's thinking through revisions for December, what he might include or might not include.
Sure. He already has a copy of this.
Right.
I'm taking notes as all of you are speaking. I'll be sure to share them with you.
Okay.
Wendy's probably taking better notes than I am.
Anything else, Deb?
Thank you. I got other comments, but I can talk with, well, I don't want to hold up the committee and thank you. But
I'll give me a call. I actually saw your notes earlier.
Yes, I have.
And
I
so
have various
send them
thoughts.
to me enough.
It's a conversation, and it should be a conversation, and it shouldn't be just me. It should be community participation.
Right. And we want to get as much input as possible. That's why we want to get this draft out to the community. And we'll continue to gather the thoughts that people have and the suggestions people have to improve it, and we'll sit down with the new superintendent after he starts and be like drinking water through a fire hose the first month or two. But as he's thinking about updating this in the December timeframe, he can take all that feedback into consideration.
I would recommend that the school committee accept this DIP, and that is because your strategic plan requires that the school improvement plans be in alignment with the district improvement plan. We only have 2 school committee meetings remaining during this school year. In order for them to bring forward, they've been working off of the drafts because, of course, they've seen this numerous times. In order for you to accept the school improvement plans, I would like for you to vote to accept the district improvement plan as it is, realizing that there is a term, it's called a living document. It is a living document, but that if you accept it as this is the in general the format that you are looking for, the information that you are looking for, a snapshot of where you are today, would be very helpful if you accepted the DIP.
And I want to emphasize to those watching at home or those that came here tonight with questions that approving the document doesn't mean we didn't listen to your comments. We will continue to gather those comments. We'll sit down with the new superintendent. But in order to move forward to the school improvement plans, you want to get the approval on this tonight.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So if there are no other visitors, are you ready to entertain?
Are there any other questions from anybody in the audience? Hearing none, I'm willing to entertain a motion.
Motion to accept the DIP?
Motion to accept from Katie.
I'll second that.
Second by Martha. Discussion by the committee?
Well, it's a good beginning.
All those in favor?
I
Opposed?
think I might cry. Thank you
Motion
very much.
passes 5-0.
I think you should have cried if we said no.
Oh, I definitely would cry then. Thank you.
It is a fabulous, huge first step in us improving the district and our students, et cetera. The next item on the agenda is student discipline policy. Jeff, I think you're going to come up on that too. Jan, do you want to kick it off, or do you want Jeff to kick it off?
I'd be happy to kick it off, and I'm going to throw it very quickly to Jeff. The school, as we've all been discussing, the school committee has been looking at policies, understanding that a policy is the broad umbrella, and then what we're talking about are procedures that follow that have the specifics of how are we going to carry out the intent of the school committee. We have in particular been talking about the alcohol and beverages. The school committee this year had several meetings on it, have looked at that policy. There are other policies that the school committee is also reviewing with an eye on what is the statement that the school committee wants to make, so that then each one of the schools can put into place the procedures to make sure that that is carried out as carefully and correctly as possible. So I asked Mr. Theodos and his two assistants, Mr. Heinricher and Mr. Delaney, in particular, to take a look at their existing handbook and think about what are some of the things that they wish had a little bit more to them, that had some up-tos, that in the past have been kind of restricted. What are some of their recommendations, so that I'm listening to what the school committee has been talking about so far as their intent for some of these policies. What are some things that they would like to do in their handbook? So even though Mr. Theodos and his staff have been incredibly busy over the last couple of weeks, and unfortunately with tragedies, they also took the time to do this. So Mr. Theodos, if you would go ahead and talk about some changes that you'd like to make to your handbook.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Norton. There's 5 changes I bring before you this evening. 2 of them have to do with drugs and alcohol, and 3 of them have to do with the general governing of the school and thought processes. I know you'll be discussing various policies, so I thought it was important that you have our thoughts as far as what we think we'd like to do to refine some of the practices we have at school. I'm going to skip the first one because that might be the most involved. If you'll indulge me, I'll just move to the second one. Student promotion. Currently, what happens is our students have to receive 5 credits per pass 5 courses per year. Each one of our full courses is worth 1 credit. And what happens is those students who attain 5 credits move to the next year, the sophomore year, 5 to 10, accumulate 10 to move to junior year, and 15 to move to senior year. And what I'd like to do is kind of make it along the lines of a college thought process, that you need X amount of credits to graduate. So at Foxborough, you need 22 credits to graduate. If you fail a course, you obviously have to repeat the course. So that there may be some students who have a combination of taking 2 freshman courses over again, but have passed 3 of the freshman courses, so they're kind of in between. And what happens from a record-keeping process is some of those students make the jump from freshman to junior year because we've retained them strictly in the homeroom. And the only purpose for keeping them in the homeroom was really, I think, for record-keeping purposes. So what I would like to be able to do is move the students along with their class, knowing full well that they have to pass the MCAS requirements, they have to get the 22 credits to graduate, and basically they move socially with their class. And I think it's an undue punishment to keep them in a freshman homeroom. I don't see any advantage to it, with one exception. There will be a small handful of students that may fail 4 or 5 courses, and they really will need to repeat the freshman year. But I think that we can deal with that on an individual basis and be able to support that student that needs that extra year as a freshman or sophomore, wherever they may be.
Jeff, I was a little confused because in the second one you talked about, as you just said, so that you deal with the homeroom issue. But in the first item, you're talking about eliminating homerooms.
Right.
So if we eliminated the homerooms in the first one, which you're going to get to afterwards, then why would the second one be an issue with homerooms because they don't exist?
It would just be, it's just a record-keeping purpose they've had on the books, that you stay with the freshman class and move along the way. So personally, I don't see a purpose to it, and that's why I'd request that change.
Right, if we're going to, we'll take them one at a time, and I'll take any comments from the committee first, and if there's anybody in the audience has a comment, then we'll move to the second one. Anybody from the committee has a comment on this one? All right, anybody from the audience?
We don't have copies. There's no copies of this.
Okay, we will make them right now.
I have it from school council, but I know nobody else has it.
And I should note that these have gone through the school council as well. They're aware and have been
And endorsed?
endorsed. Yes.
Okay.
It's good to know.
And that's an important statement to make. Just going back to its, policy, and the school committee comes up with, again, the general umbrella, and then how each one of the schools goes to the school councils to work with the administration. So the cover letter on this says that, it's under review, which means that, they were still talking about it in their school council. So it's not the school committee that makes the decisions for each one of the schools, but then once they want to make the changes to the handbooks, they bring it to you.
Right.
Should want me to continue?
Okay, yeah, why don't you go to the next item?
Okay. I think the next one was just an oversight. Leaving school without permission. What the current penalty calls for is up to 3 D halls. But this is, in my opinion, is a serious offense on a student's part. I mean, it's very easy for a student to decide they don't want to be in school and walk out the back door and get caught the next day. But I don't think anyone would understand if they got into their car, got into an accident, and they were supposed to be in school. Despite the fact that it can happen, I just want our students to understand the seriousness of that particular decision. So I really would like to bump that up to 3 school days of out-of-school suspension to show the seriousness of what we're trying to do. Last year we promoted direct access and egress from doors during the school day, and it should all take place from the main school door, again, as a safety procedure in the school. We're not perfect with it, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you we're perfect with it, but again, I think that just more stringent consequences need to be put forth so our students understand the severity of leaving school the wrong way, but leaving school in general, because I would hate to sit here and say that one of our students was hurt because they foolishly got in their car when they shouldn't have and left. So I think that would kind of put a little more teeth, I guess, into the consequence.
Questions from the committee?
3D halls, what is that comparable? I mean, that is significant consequence.
Mhm.
I mean, having teenagers, they wouldn't want, and could probably try their best to get out of one, let alone if they had 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty, what are the comparable offenses to the 3D halls?
Usually, the first offense is a teacher detention, and if a student doesn't follow the procedures, they end up getting a D hall, which is a 3-hour detention after school, monitored by one of our teachers, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So the student would sit and do their work quietly for 3 hours.
But the consequence of leaving schools would be an automatic 3?
1 to 3.
One,
1 to
oh,
3.
okay.
Yeah. We try not to suspend students. We really do, and we try to reason as much as possible. There comes a point in time where I think sometimes they equate kindness with weakness, and it forces us to act a little bit more stringently.
I misunderstood. I'm getting punchy. So it's the consequence is still a D hall, up to 3 D halls. And then the second offense would be suspension. You're saying no longer have D hall. So for
Right
the
to
first
suspension.
offense of moving to go immediately to suspension.
Correct.
And what about possible loss of driving privileges? That's taken off totally?
It's another piece to monitor. If you told a student he couldn't park on school grounds, there's so many places close by. You might sneak into the church, you might sneak into the IGO and cause more trouble than it's worth. So it's really a monitoring piece. We've done that before. We've suspended for a week and 2 weeks the driving privileges. So that is a
Does
possibility
this
as
happen
well.
often?
Does it happen often?
Often enough.
Often enough, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think to move from one D hall for me personally to go to a 3-day suspension,
Up
that's
to.
That's up to the discretion,
But
of your
it says
discretion, right?
One or two or three.
I think-
One up
I
to
mean, what I'd
three.
like to finish, though, is I think we need to do whatever we can to strengthen discipline, but I'm also concerned that, and how does that equate to other serious offenses? We have to send a message, but to miss 3 days of learning for, and so you're saying that would not be for a first offense, then that would be for,
Yes, I
it's
think
very murky to me.
it is. I think what
You know,
would...
if you said, you do this, you get 3 D halls, and then if it happens again, then, you know, you could be suspended. To me, that's firm, that's tough, but to move right into up to 3 days, how do you deal with that? How do you make?
I think it would be prior offenses that have taken place, you know, if it's cutting classes multiple times or, you know, not being in appropriate areas. I think we would look at the discipline piece to say the penalty is 1 to 3 days of suspensions based on, you know, the entire record. Knowing for sure that one day is absolutely going to happen.
I don't have
So-
a problem with that. I think that's tough. It's just, it's a little loosey-goosey for me, and I'd like it to be tough.
Well, I think you need to send a strong message that this is not going to be tolerated. You don't leave this building for any reason unless somebody knows about it, and you go through the channels. You have to, you know, in view of what's transpired, you just can't have people walking in and out of here at a whim. And I think you need to send a very strong message, and this is one way of doing it. Personally, I'd love to see you tack it on at the end of the year, but I don't know who's going to be around to do it.
But I think the other thing that's
That would be a stronger
important
message.
is we have to have confidence in the administrative team. And so when it says from 1 to 3 days, we have to rely on your judgment, your fairness. Parents are going to appeal, they're going to complain if they think it's unfair. So I hear what Kate's saying, but, you know, I don't need to see, under this circumstances, 1 day, this is 2 days, this is 3 days. I'm comfortable giving you and your team the discretion and the accountability that you'll be held accountable to make sure it's consistent and every student is treated fairly and equally.
Would the committee be more comfortable saying on the first offense it's 1 day and subsequent offenses is 3 days?
No, because you have to
do that
take in
as
the
well.
whole picture of what the student's doing, and that's something that we can never be privy to. So I think it's your call and your team's call.
And I'm comfortable with that, too. The purpose of my question was just for my own clarity. To my knowledge, that's not an offense that my children have been involved with, so I wanted to make sure I understood. It's coming out. You mean they haven't been caught?
Don't give them any ideas.
No.
But I think
I
we
just
need to
needed to
send a strong
understand. Thank you,
message.
Mr.
Any other questions from committee members? There's someone in the audience? You have to come up to the microphone, though, because the cable folks get fussy, because people can't hear at
And we
home.
can't lose our cable folks. They're too valuable.
So you'll just get exercise coming back and forth with your questions.
I'm happy to say that I don't have personal knowledge of our entire behavior code. However, and I know that the handbook at the high school is being looked at and reviewed, we do still differentiate between in-school and out-of-school suspensions, correct? Do we?
We don't have in-school suspension.
Okay, because my question isn't this consistent with the child's intent to not be in school anyway? Are we giving them 3 days off?
No, you're not.
Like, what is it that's, if that child did not want to be in school, why are they personally going to feel that suspension is a very strong negative message?
They may have wanted to go to the sub shop because they didn't like the food at the cafeteria. And that's,
Right.
but they wanted to be here for the class for that day. They just wanted to go out for lunch, or they wanted to go out to run an errand. And so you're raising the question between an in-house suspension, where they'd have to come to school for 3
Yes.
days and sit in a room,
Yes,
versus being at home.
yes.
I think what I tell the parent all the time, if it was my child and they got suspended for 3 days, it wouldn't be a holiday. So I think each parent enforces that piece as they see fit. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree that some kids think it's going to be a holiday, but the holiday ends when they lose credit for the class and they don't go to the next level. So the punishment is such that you need to be in school in order to learn. We're not going to allow you to disrupt the process because we have to chase you around and figure out where you are. And then I have to answer the fact that maybe you got into an accident. So the question is, how did you leave school and why did you leave school? So I think you're right. Some kids and some parents think it's a holiday. I can't control that. My goal is to make it as efficient as possible and to provide opportunities for our kids to learn and not have to tolerate some of the foolishness that we tolerate. That's all.
Right.
But I hear you.
One of my concerns would be that the child would be less supervised out of our building than they would be if we made them come to an in-school suspension. The question regarding that is, if you have a 3-day suspension, is it the same as an absentee policy where you get 3 days to make up the work? Is that true?
Yeah, you would get 3 days to make up the work. However, you would also get 3 days of unexcused absences next to your name, which would move towards a potential loss of credit. So, they'll have to weigh the advantage of leaving and the ultimate loss of credit based on X amount of absences.
And you're saying that we don't have an in-school suspension?
We
right
don't.
now?
We don't have it. Some schools do. My experience with it is you're always kind of prodding the student in that time to do their work. You have to have the resources to be able to monitor the room, and there's always a student. If they don't value education, you deal with the same things. The head is on the desk, you're elbowing, come on, Johnny, get up and start doing your work. As soon as you turn your back, the head is down again. So it really became a babysitting service. I found it not to be productive over the years that we've been involved with the inside suspension piece. The only other part, I'll agree with you, it is probably a safer venue having the kids in school than potentially home if the parents are working, so we recognize that.
But the parents have to take the accountability and the responsibility if their child's suspended and they're going to take them to work or they've got to do something with them to ensure their safety. That's their responsibility. I'm not in favor of the babysitting kind of a rule.
Right. I didn't know whether there would be an in-school suspension where they would attend all of their classes, but in situations such as gym and studies, that they would become supervised. They would sit in guidance or they would sit in the office.
No.
And not miss school time. All right, thank you.
Any other questions from anybody on that one? If not, we'll move on to number 3.
Alcohol possession and alcohol use, or being under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Really what we're asking, there's a first and second offense that comes with alcohol possession, whether you're a student in school or whether you're an athlete. And again, what we just wanted to do is be able to utilize the entire student discipline record to make a decision whether we felt they deserved to remain in the school activity or the athletic program. So what we put is first or second offenses may carry a permanent suspension from extracurricular activities / sports programs. A decision to exclude a student after either offense will be at the discretion of the principal, but based on the student's school discipline record. And I can really sit here before you and say, I really don't want to play God in these matters. I truly don't. But I think I've been patient, and I've watched for the last 2 years, and I have some concerns about the way our students do business. And I've always vowed that I was never going to run a tramp program, regardless of what area we were talking, whether it was academics or athletics. And I think the time has come to ratchet it up a little bit. And so that's the rationale.
Well, the committee has been very adamant on the need to educate the community that we do have a drug and alcohol problem here. And so I think, from my viewpoint, it is important to demonstrate to the students and the parents how serious we are as a school committee on the impact of drugs and alcohol on our students. So I think it is also time to ratchet it up. Questions from the committee? Katie?
What do you mean by permanent suspension from extracurricular activities?
Meaning they lose the privilege for the year, and they
For
can
the
come
year.
back and reapply for the following year.
I think this is one area we have to send a strong message, and just, I know there's different degrees of how these kids do it, and they sometimes make bad choices, and I think it's time to hold them accountable. And I think we need to send
Is
a
your
very
word, though,
clear
Katie, the
message.
word permanent should be for the full school year? Because
Well, that's
permanent makes it
one-
sound like the whole career.
Well, that's one issue. I mean, I guess I do have some, I absolutely think we need to respond to this, but I do have some concerns about a first offense for the entire year. We're going from a 2-week, from a first offense, if I read this correctly, to 2 weeks of suspension from extracurricular activities. And, I mean, from 2 weeks to a year seems like, you know, a big change.
Right. My
in
point,
terms of our policy on that. So,
my point with that would be if the student had an alcohol offense, they would be suspended for 25% of, let's say there's an athlete, 25% or 2 weeks of their contest.
Yeah.
But if this person prior to that had multiple school issues, you know, a theft, a couple fights, things of we're talking about character and citizenship, that's where that potential piece would kick in, that we would say, you know, you're an ambassador for us and you're not really being an ambassador. I think that maybe the year's over for you.
It also sends a very strong message to athletes, people in band or people in music, that if you really have a passion for football or band or music, there's a big consequence. So when the coach sits down on a regular basis and says, "We got to know, we got a tough principle here, and if you're caught doing these things, you're out for the season. You're out for not just football, but football. Maybe you play basketball, then you play baseball. You could lose your whole season. It could affect your college scholarship." Or the same with band, or same with drama. So this sends a very strong message. It gives the coaches a real tool to hopefully drive home with their extracurricular students how important drug and alcohol abuse is. And if you start to see students that have other issues like you just described, they could be very symbolic of the fact that they really do have a problem and they need some help.
well, that's the other issue. You know, I was reviewing some of the policies that we received in our packet from other school systems. And one of the things that is in those policies is when someone has an offense, a drug or alcohol offense, a lot of the schools provide drug and alcohol counseling or education, okay, in addition to what we've already been doing in the curriculum. And I wonder, yes, we want to send a message, I agree, but I think it's also an opportunity to educate our youth at that particular time when they have committed an offense in terms of drug and alcohol education. And, you know, people may argue, well, they already know, and, you know, what good is it going to do? But I think it's important. I think it's a message that we're saying that not only is we're going to be having a consequence, but there's going to be a continual emphasis on drug and alcohol education. And I think that needs to be part of what we are providing to these kids. We can say, you know, it's the parents, we can say it's the, but I think we have a responsibility. And I think that if someone commits an offense the first time, that's the time to get them. That's the time to say, we're going to put you in, you're going to see, you know, whatever the program is, and I'm not up on the latest, but you know, send them to a program where they see people who are recovering alcoholics and what they've been through. Send them to AA meetings or whatever. But I think that needs to be a piece of this, because I think we want to emphasize that as part of our commitment to trying to deal with this.
In that respect, Katie, could you, as part of the policy, recommend that before the student returns to, you know, from his punishment or her punishment, they and their parents have to attend a program, and their parents have to have a certification?
I think the advantage of this clause is just for that purpose as well, that I would have that ability, or the administration would have that ability to say, you know what, with these offenses, before you come back, here's what you need to do. So they would really have to follow the protocol in order to get back into whatever program they were in.
But that leaves the door open, though, for Johnny to have it and for Susie not to. And I think that there needs to be more uniformity when it comes to that. Yes, you have discretion to say, based on a child's history, of course. But I think that if we want to be proactive with every child, you know, we don't know what the circumstances are relating to a particular offense. I mean, it could be a long history, it could be, we don't know. And I think we got to seize the moment then to respond to it. And I think that there, you know, you could come up with a lot of reasons, maybe, you know, for one particular child or student as to why maybe you won't be suggesting that. But maybe it might be the best thing for them. And it might be something that, again, we want to adopt as a committee to say, this is what we expect and what we want. And it's taking a big leap, I realize that, because, you know, that's putting this responsibility on the parents, and we saying as a school district that we think, you know, that we are serious enough about this, that we actually want you to get additional help with this. I think that's really important.
I would be very comfortable doing that. My only concern would be availability. Sometimes when they're off, it may not coincide necessarily with the offense.
Well, here's the other issue, and Katie, I think you're right to bring this up. And yes, this is an opportunity, and I believe the staff would seize that opportunity, and that if a student and with the support of their parents are willing to talk about that particular first, or even it's not just, you don't get them to reason often with the first offense. It usually takes more than that. But that would be a mitigating circumstance, and it sounds like you're taking that into account. And I think that's very applaudable. My concern to make it mandatory is, wait a minute, guys, this country is suffering with mental health issues, reimbursable insurance, let alone medical services. Do you realize for a certified, qualified program, you're talking $5,000 on up? For a rehab program, if you can even get your insurance under its mental health to pay for it. So until we're ready to come up with an alternative to that, and I think it's important, I think if we started to do something with the alcohol and drug forum, it looks like this group is going to have some education and resources on our website, but I don't want to tie the hands of the administration or our own hands. We got all-day kindergarten, we have a lot of expenses coming up, so to mandate that, I would be very concerned because there aren't programs.
Well,
Other schools are.
How about this? You know, unfortunately, we have children that are at risk, and would be burying our heads in the sand if we thought otherwise. But I think, you know, as we get more expanded roles with guidance counselors and whatever throughout the system, we're going to have a better handle on some of these students and some of the problems that we're having. And we have to be more proactive, but you know, Katie, you know as well as I do that probably the first thing is admitting you have a problem and trying to get some help. And I think that's where we can be proactive as a school, as administrators, to sit down with these kids. I mean, the first time offender who experiments is one thing, but certainly Jeff sees kids that are at risk, and there's some sort of a pattern. There's acting out, there's different things that are going on, and these are our most vulnerable children, and we owe as much to them as we do the kid who's at the top of the class who isn't having any problems. I mean, the time to try to reach some of these kids and curtail what's happening and offer them some sort of support services is now. You know, and that's something that we have to work through, maybe through health or whatever, in order to be able to identify these kids and not just see them as troublemakers or troubled, but kids who are at risk, and this is going to be something they're going to have to deal with for the rest of their lives. So I think the more we can intervene, the more we can help these students. You know, it's not just about punishing them. Exactly. It's about trying to get them some help. But, you know, unless a child is willing to say, I have a problem, unless the parents are willing to say, there's a problem here, our hands are tied, legally, fiscally, whatever. But I think we need to do more in the counseling area. We need to you always have to take a step back and take a look at the whole picture. You know, it's like in medicine, you don't just treat the problem, you treat the whole patient. And I think we need to treat the whole student. And I think as we expand our services and we see what's going on, maybe we'll be better equipped, but not everybody has that forte, not everybody can handle that. But I think we need to understand and have our eyes wide open that there's kids that are at risk in this system, in every system, and we need to identify it, try to get them some help. We can't force it.
Can we work with Jeff to put language in here, though, at his discretion, to give him the latitude to require education for both the parent and the child at a certain level before they come back?
I don't think it's just education, Larry. I'm talking services.
I understand that, but the point is that if the family doesn't have insurance, as Kate pointed out, the family has no insurance, they have no insurance.
Right.
My point, though, would be Alcoholics Anonymous is free. There could be writing in such a way where Jeff's recommending to both the parent and the child that they need to go to 3 or 4 of those classes. Now, you might say they're just going to go, they're not going to pay attention, but it's an effort on our part to try to get them to recognize it. We can't mandate someone who doesn't have insurance to go through a program.
That's not what I was, you misunderstood me. That's not what I was talking about, a program. What I'm talking about is the educational piece of it, be it AA or be it a program that we start to institute more in addressing this problem within our own curriculum.
And I would agree with you on AA because that's already in existence, but to develop our own program and have a have someone available to try to work with the student could be very difficult, other than with the guidance counselors trying to work with them and coach them and counsel them. And
Well, one of the things employers know that often you don't get to the root of the problem until that individual employee is ready to lose their job. I think the hook that we're giving to help get this issue on the table and dealt with is the fact, hey, you're going to lose your band opportunity or drama or athletic opportunity. And I think that that's, by holding that standard, that is the way in which to get both the student's attention and the parent's attention, so that it's not the one-time offender, because then it wouldn't be an issue. But the student who is truly at risk, who has developed a pattern of tolerance, who is moving into some kind of a cycle of dependency, you then will have the latitude to require them, the mitigating circumstance, unless you can prove to us, and this is what it would take for this kind, because at this point, this is the level of service that you would need to go get, then they would not be allowed back into their activity. So maybe that's the way. It's a stick and it's also a carrot at the same time.
I still think, though, going from the 2 weeks to, again, for a first offense, 2 weeks to a permanent for a year.
But it's up to permanent.
Does seem harsh.
It
does seem harsh.
It says may, Carrie. It didn't just jump.
So it's giving them a latitude. I missed that on the first one.
Well, I know it says may, but, okay.
But it's student, it's based, he has said constantly, each one of these is based on the student record.
Right.
The student has created his own track, his or her
His or her own track
own track record.
What it is right now is their hands are tied. The child looks in the handbook and says, oh, the best you can do is suspend me for 2 weeks, so what?
Right.
This allows them to, that constant offender, or the child that comes, in this particular one, comes
Maybe the
to
language
the point
could
of
be a little more
endangering himself
specific.
and everybody else. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really severe.
Right.
It gives him an opportunity to go up to, say, you know what?
Yeah.
You need to be concentrating on something other than football.
Yes.
So those are,
And
it's
I-
a may. It
I
just
agree.
gives
I
them
think
another
that's
hand.
important. I understand that. I think that's important, but I guess maybe it's the language that
I would have no problem looking at resources that are available too, because I agree that education piece is important when dealing with student problems. I just, again, my fear would be the consistency of being able to offer it. So I'd be happy to look and see what kind of program maybe we could craft internally as part school and part outside to provide that kind of support to the students. So that
It
would
might be
good.
something that you might consider. We could get some materials, certainly plenty of materials, that Jeff would give to the parent and to the student and say, okay, I want you to read this and sign off that you've read it. So when you return, because we want the student to come back to school. We don't want him to stay away forever. We want to come back so we can teach him.
Well, we want
so we want to
parents.
send them away. So the first one, the first time here you are, here's some materials. I want both of you to sign this. When you come back, you hand this to me that you've signed off, that you've read it. I mean, nobody's going to stand over the top of it and make sure that they've read it, but we provided something. And then, as Martha was pointing out, as you go along, and we're bringing guidance counselors back. We're bringing more people back. As you get more people back, we can work in additional programs. So it might be a case that this child now is in a small support group. So during the school day or after school, it'd be required to come and sit with a guidance counselor in a group, with somebody who's trained. Right now, we just don't have it, so to say that we're going to have it until you don't have it, but I think that there's a lot of things that you can be starting to put into place and heading in that direction. I agree with you, Katie.
Ingrid, you had a question?
I was just going to comment, in one of the sample policies that are in the packet, I don't know if it's something that you want to consider. I know you've done a lot of work on it, but when Katie mentioned going from 2 weeks to a full year suspension, Gil Montague's policy, they wrote, upon return to school, the student will be barred from participation in all extracurricular activities listed below for 1 calendar year from the date of the offense. If, however, the student has successfully completed an approved chemical substance abuse program and such is so certified in writing by the program director, he or she will be barred participation 60 days. So I don't know if that's something you might want to consider as an incentive for the child to.
I mean, there's a gray area too, because some of the programs that our students are involved with are the last bastion, if you will, for them deciding whether they're going to stay in school or not stay in school. So I don't take the fact that through various offenses we could take that privilege away from them, and I think that feeds into the thought process as well. It is it's just not clean cut. No matter how you look at it, there's potential problems associated with it. Just know that our regime does not take suspension lightly, and we don't take privilege away from kids lightly. That's usually our last option before we get to that point, because we've run out of options. So,
Mr. Nevedo, if you have a question, could you come to the front, please?
Good evening, Andres Naveda, 94 Spruce. This is a very touchy subject, an issue, but I think that we need to trust the principal to do this. In the past, we've heard that there's a discipline team that does rounds and get together on a periodic basis. They may be able to review all these different disciplines that have been meted out and come to a consensus that, yes, they are within what we have together agreed, and that way you don't have the principal having to play God. There's a backup, and there's also an assurance to the community that there's a multitude of people and not just one person making this decision. And as much concern that we have for the perpetrator or the person that has done this act, we need to look at how to remedy and bring them back into a productive part of society. I think we have to also see the suspension that other people suffer, and in this particular case, it was not in a school event, but that a child receives some burns at an outdoor activity and then ends up in the hospital for several days with the medical bills that we know how high they are. I think we should also consider that those people have received effectively a suspension from school, and they were not allowed to participate in the learning process, and that is the environment that you're trying to prevent. I think that our educators are educators, and the discipline, it should be stringent, I think. So I applaud you for what you're doing here, and I hope you consider some of those ideas.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Jeff, we'll move on to your next one.
Okay, I think this is going to go a little bit hand in hand. The MIAA, which is the governing body of athletics, this past week has changed their thought process pertaining to suspension and students involved in sport programs. So the essence is simply this. If you get caught with alcohol or drugs in the fall and you're not a fall athlete, the penalty starts when you participate in the next sport.
Ooh, they closed that loophole.
They
Good
did.
for them.
So again, means from the start of the school year to the last day of the school year, you're accountable for your actions, and it ultimately affects your participation in sports. So theoretically, if a person was caught twice in the fall, they would probably be ineligible for the winter because that would have been their second offense, and that would have required the maximum penalty. So our kids are going to have to be educated about the new thought process and understand its implications, because I know they won't. And so we're going to walk some landmines very early.
Each of the coaches will be responsible for making sure on
Yes.
day one they have these conversations.
Yeah, and I think what we'll do next year is we'll mandate a parent student meeting in the fall, in the winter, in the spring to clearly articulate that piece, because I know they're not going to understand the implications. It's important they do, and we'll send it home in the newsletter in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
But it will be in the handbook, so when they
It'll be in
read
the
that,
handbook,
and they're
too.
obligated to sign it and say that they
Correct.
read it and reviewed it, so.
Correct.
Questions from the committee?
I think it's good. It's about time we did that.
This is good.
It's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Anybody in the audience have a question? Please come up.
I just want to be sure that, I've been on the school council at the high school for 2 years, and I didn't understand that this meant that alcohol-related incidents that occur outside of the school as well as within the school, but that's not the case for other activities. And that's an inconsistency. We're more stringent on the athletes because of the MIAA guidelines. And, we have discussed this as a school council, so I'm not suggesting that we make a different decision now, but I think it's something that the committee should be aware of, that if it's an incident that occurs out in the community and you're in the newspaper for alcohol incident, then that would affect you for sports.
Right.
But if you had you were president of student council, you could come back and still be president of student council. And I think that that's something, if we're trying to put some teeth into our procedures,
across
that
the
we
board.
would want to consider. And, you know, talking about discipline policies, I don't know that this is the realm to make really good decisions, because there's so many more people that should probably be involved in looking at all of the options for policies, et cetera. You know, as a parent, you might have one idea, as I said earlier, this is oh, this makes sense, this is what you should do, but not understand administratively what that would mean in terms of tracking the, you know, what kind of a program do you mean, et cetera. So, you know, we're looking at the policy, I mean, the handbook for next year, trying to make the discipline procedures a little bit easier to understand. You'll see that in our SIP, because there's so many pages in the handbook that relate to discipline that it makes it confusing if you just want to say, okay, what happens if I do this? You know, is there some kind of a grid or a table or something that we could put together that makes it easier for people to understand? But that's an area of inconsistency that I didn't understand until just recently, like within
So
the last.
Why don't we close
But I
that,
think when
discuss
they-
how we
but-
close that loophole?
Make there a consistency between
Yeah, we're
the
serious.
3 and 4. So
Well, I
it is
think it does,
consistent.
because if they're saying extracurricular activities, to me, that means anything else they're involved in.
Right, the first one relates to being under the influence of alcohol at a school event or at school. The MIAA one takes it further and says in the community. So
On a
if
Saturday
you
or Sunday.
Saturday night you were picked up and your blood alcohol was above the legal limit, and it was in the newspaper the next day, that would affect you as an athlete, but would not affect you as a curricular participant.
And I think your suggestion is that we make it consistent.
Right,
Whether
but I
it's-
just want to make sure that it doesn't create any, just in terms of the way it would be administered, that it's thought through. I don't know that I want to rush through making that decision right now unless the committee wants to, but I think, you know, I do think it's a loophole.
Jeff, what are your thoughts on the consistency or inconsistency?
The application with anything that's outside of school is always difficult. Trying to piece the evidence together it is very, very time consuming, and you know, you want to make sure you're accurate in doing the right things. It's certainly cleaner in school or at school events. It's kind of clear cut. The athletes are held to a higher standard because the MIA is the governing body and is said to do that. Do we have that ability? Sure, we have that ability to say and do that. You know, I guess I'd have to think a little bit more about it. I mean, I feel that we should hold all our kids to an accountable
The same
Right.
standard, the same
One
standard.
standard
Why
for
wouldn't we?
everybody.
Why wouldn't we? What would be the point not to? I mean, would there be a legal issues that would say we don't want to extend it to any student that does something, or, you know, outside of school property?
I guess it's what's the arm of the law, if you will. What's the arm of the high school? Where are our limits? How far do we go? How
I think if
intrusive
you
are
are
we?
arrested, I think
Pardon
if
me?
you are arrested, whether you're an athlete or you're in the band or you're in drama, whatever the activity is, if you're arrested, then that arrest takes place, I think it should be fairly applied, period.
I agree.
Because that's what's going to send the message. And if we're going to move the community into a position of alcohol and drug-free, forgetting, we're not even anywhere close. We're probably years still away from zero tolerance. But just to get the community to move to alcohol and drug-free, like our schools are, then I think you have to bring that in, and it's got to be consistent, whether you're an athlete, whatever. If you are adjudicated, in my mind, that does not put a burden on the school. It calls it fairly the way it is. If you have been arrested, okay, now then you have the legal issue. Well, is it the arrest or is it the conviction? But I think if you have the arrest and it's not the school, but the police have done their job and you have been arrested, I think that should be the threshold that there's going to be some action. Now, whether you legally wait until they're convicted, but I understand there was a situation, two students were involved in a drinking situation, but because of the way in which they were charged, one was precluded from school activities, and the other student who was involved was not. So, I mean, parents and students are creative. There will be ways to find loopholes. I think what we need to do is to be as consistent as possible and close that down and say that we want to be fair and consistent.
And the only piece I would add to that is this assumption that we know about the things that go on, which necessarily is not the case.
We read about them in the paper.
What's that?
We read about them in the paper.
But there's not always a name connected
Jeff
to it.
doesn't necessarily live, he doesn't live here in Foxborough, he might not get the Foxborough Reporter.
There's
No,
not always
I'm just saying
Friday morning.
that there are those that are missed as well. So sometimes when you're in the community and you're hearing the conversations, I'm not saying it's accurate or inaccurate. I just say that you may know what's going on better than we do sometimes, and that's those situations, that's all. Or if the students are involved in a function, you may know more about those things that go on and the extent to which it goes on than we do, that's all. But I have no problem. My question, I guess, back would be, do we suspend on the arrest, or do we wait until there's a finding? A felony is a felony. I think that's an easy one, but I don't know. I would throw that as far as a policy piece maybe to consider. One of the reasons I wanted to come forward is to at least share what our thoughts were, so as you people start to develop your policies, it'll
I
hopefully
think
give
what
you some insight.
what I've heard the committee say, Jeff, is they would like you to give some thought to how do we make whatever the policy is consistent for sports
Okay.
or anything else. And I'm not sure we have the answer, and we don't have the legal implications, but we'd like to have it strong, and we'd like to have it consistent. I'd also like to ask you to take one further step, and that is, and Jan and I have talked about this, and I hope this doesn't create a problem, but when Jan and I have talked, I'm not sure that each teacher is properly equipped with dealing with a student who may be under the influence. And so when Jan described for me last fall at a football game, the steps that she took to recognize that certain students were under the influence, she was educating a teacher as well on what the teacher should be doing. And so I don't know, I want to make sure that we're not just addressing the students, but we're also equipping our teachers to know what, and Jan went through the 3 or 4 steps that a teacher should do very quickly, like, for instance, getting right up and smelling their breath. There are certain routines that Jan learned years ago that she has been using and been trying to teach teachers here. We need to make sure that there's an educational program for our teachers and our administrators so that people are working fairly and they're treating students fairly. And Jan, I don't know if you wanted to add something to that, but you shared with me, you've personally been tutoring some people on how to do it. Sure. So do you feel that we need a program for our teachers, or did you just deal with
Oh, yeah, I think it's something that we can certainly arrange to have. The police, I'm sure, would be more than happy to come in and work with staff members and explain to them signs to be looking for.
Yeah.
I think it's not just the alcohol. That was the particular case that you brought up. I'm concerned about students being under the influence of drugs, and they can get through too much of the day before somebody takes a look at them and sees that their eyes are telling them they were just paying attention. So, not to go into the details there either, but the police are well trained in it, and I feel certain that the chief would be more than happy to have Tim O'Leary or someone else come over here and work with us. So.
Well, I think it's
that's
important
good professional
that
development.
all the teachers be properly
Put
trained.
that on the list for professional development.
Your next one.
The first one is just the change of the bell schedule and the elimination of homeroom. It's twofold. What I'd like to be able to do, currently what happens at the end of the first period is a 4-minute passing time. They go to homeroom for 4 minutes for morning announcements, and then there's another 4-minute passing time. So it's 12 minutes that I think we can consolidate and put to better use. So the thought is to cut down X amount of time, probably about 9 minutes there, and take 1 minute off of each lunch, which would give us 21 hours additional instructional time, but I'd like to take and put towards a midterm exam for our students like we do with the finals. My prejudice is I think that you can't do justice to a full year course trying to administer exam, and I'd like to try to follow the college model and say I would like to test them on half a year's work twice, and to do that appropriately, and to make sure the tests are rigorous, and to make sure that they have time to ask the quality questions and correct the questions requires that we build in a little time into the schedule. So what I'd like to do is go for 3 half-days midterm like we do at finals. So take that time we've gained and utilize that for a midterm and a final, which would mean now, instead of making the final worth 20% of our grade, it would be 10%. Unless they're in a half-year course, then it would say 20. So that's, now that being said, I guess I'd like you to consider the concept because.
And that was the controversial one.
Yes, because.
Some of us have been asking for that one a long time.
Only because-
Thank you for being so innovative and figuring out the solution, because it came down to, it was a nit on scheduling. So thank you, Mr. Theodos.
It is predicated on a new system, though. That's the glitch, that if we're not up, and what I would like to do is still run the proposed schedule, but it might mean we would be in our old schedule until we came fully on board with the SIS system, because what it requires is that we electronically send our attendance to the office every day. So that means what the homeroom is gone, so whatever period starts today would be the attendance taking piece. So they would just submit it to the office, would have the names and print the attendance for the day.
Speaking of the SIS, I'd like to have that on an agenda as well, where the committee gets up to speed with this new system. What is it going to do for us? What are the features that it has? And we have some dialogue around that, including the timetable for implementation, the resources for implementation, and to make sure that Mr. Bartolotti and his team have what they need to do it successfully with everything else they have going on, like the new accounting system and rolling out 250 new computers, et cetera. Okay, Paul?
So noted.
Questions from the committee on this first item?
Just the elimination of the homeroom, aside from attendance. Is there another function of the homeroom?
Report cards, you know, whenever you have to send out information alphabetically by class, you need something. So we would still have a homeroom, but we'd probably utilize it like at the end of the day, 2 minutes to send the kids back to get whatever materials they need. So we would eliminate that piece.
Excellent idea. They're always so motivated when it's on their time, right? And I bet you're right. You only need 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Questions from anyone in the audience on that one? Okay, Jeff, do you have a consensus from the school committee at this point, or do you feel you need a vote?
I just, our handbooks won't go to print till probably the end of July, so that if you feel comfortable to vote on the issues, fine. If not, I know the alcohol piece, as far as first and second offense, I'd be happy to go back and look and try to put some sort of thought process together there.
I'd rather you do that if it's all right with you. I mean, I think you've heard the consensus where the committee wants to go.
Also, check again with the school council. I mean, they've been invaluable, and I would be very comfortable hearing what they have to say.
But I think we're on the
Thank
same page. We want to give you the additional flexibility you need to help students in trouble.
Thank you.
All right. Next
I
item.
appreciate you thinking of me, but the reason why I didn't want to go up early is I figured if I could beat the asbestos abatement, that'd be in good shape.
Thank you.
But that's the fun stuff. Thanks, Jeff. It's wonderful. I appreciate all your help.
Paul, you want to discuss this bid award?
Yes, sir. Bids were opened on May 9th. We received 4 bids. They range from a low bid of $87,277 to a high of $143,921. This is for the removal of the vinyl asbestos floor tile at the Igo School and the replacement with what is known as vinyl composite tile. And there's a couple rooms that would have rugs. The vendor that submitted the low bid has done several abatement projects for us. And I would recommend the school committee award bid number 2007-14 to Suburban Middlesex Installation, Inc. in the amount of $87,277.
Do I have a motion?
I'll second.
Motion by Katie, second by Betty. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Just as a note of interest, there'll be no student programs in the Igo School this summer. And as soon as school is out, we're going to start clearing out all the rooms, and the contractor's going to come in and with a SWAT approach with the ultimate goal of having the rooms taken care of, new tile put down, and have it done before the end of July, so that that'll give us plenty of time to wax the floors and get the rooms reset up.
Okay. Next item is the budget summary update, Paul.
I've attached the budget summary update in the new format. The summary statement that you have in front of you shows a projected surplus of $115,438. Since the budget summary statement was put together, we picked up an additional $30,000 from the Spoke Collaborative. This would bring our projected surplus to $145,438. The changes are detailed starting on the next page. There are...
And you build the Spoke into the next report.
Yes, I will put the Spoke in the next.
So we can approve this one as is, but the extra is just for information at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not going to look at anything less than $1,000, but you can see it there, and there were 5 different movements. Total net change positive $1,691. And plant utilities, we picked up $7,500 in telephone. Part of this is a discount program called E-rate that we were waiting for. It finally has arrived. So there was $7,500 that we picked up there. In addition, we reprojected gas based on our warm spring. We've picked up an additional $16,500. So the net change on this statement is $27,108. It would be my expectation to have a updated budget statement for the next school committee meeting on the 4th.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve this report?
I'll make
that.
Made by Bevy, seconded by Katie. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Now, Paul, on the suggestions for the use of the surplus, you have given out a new form this evening.
Yes.
To the committee. Did you make copies for the public as well?
Yes.
Okay, so that's up there.
Yes.
This new format puts it in a series of priorities 1, 2, and 3, and does reflect the $145,000 that Paul has today. Paul, do you and Jan want to just walk us through your thoughts?
Oh, go ahead.
Language Lab, $2,875. These are for the student carol, so in effect the furniture. We'd like to add one on the end of every row to give us an additional 5 stations, so that at the point when, and it does happen on occasion, that there are more than 25 students in that language lab, we actually have a computer for them, and it also allows us the ability that if one does break down, there would be spares available. This would be just for the furniture itself, which would match the existing furniture, and it would be a bolt-on add-on, and then we'll populate it with computers, so just under $3,000. Recommend funding that out of surplus. Next item on the list would be for 10 of the round cafeteria tables, finishing out the purchase that we've made over the last 2 years for the high school. These are the round tables that fold and are on wheels. Recommend funding that out of the cafeteria revolving $47.50. 100 cafeteria chairs. These would be the what would be known as sled chairs. They're plastic, molded, top, back. They're stackable. They're light. They're much easier to use, and they're pretty durable. $2,500 also out of cafeteria revolving. 78 desks at $90 a piece. These are the combo desk chair units that we use throughout the building. We need approximately 78 to round out the purchase that we've made over the last few years, so that every room would have the new style desk and chair, which some of those old style ones I can't sit in. I can sit in the new ones. 200 window shades at approximately $45 each. Other than the music suite, the window shades in this building are all original. They're in very, very tough condition. We'd like to start replacing them. Mike O'Leary has estimated $9,000 to replace 200 of the window shades, again out of the surplus. 8 chairs for the CAD lab. We bought 8 chairs last year, and we'd like to buy another 8 for the CAD lab at $920 surplus. We've got additional students taking woodworking classes. And now that Mr. Theodos is left, we can take this off the list. Price increases on everything that we purchase. Additional students, we'd like an additional $1,000 for woodworking supplies for the class, $1,000 from surplus. The PAVE program has requested a dishwasher. We took a look. There is not a dishwasher in the PAVE area. Michael Leary felt that probably the least labor-intensive way to do this would be with a portable dishwasher. It would be just slightly under $500 to purchase that. 3 LCD projectors, $2,100, one for foreign language, one for business, and one for special education. The special education primarily being in the PAVE room. 2 carts with TVs and VCR DVDs set up on them for world language. There's one in the budget for FY08. They would like 2 additional ones, so there's one in each one of the rooms, $2,270. That's an estimated price. We intend on all of these items to go out and shop and get the best possible price. Am I going too fast?
No.
Okay. Art department, Jerry Roy would like an Epson Stylus Pro 7800 professional edition printer. It actually prints on roll paper. And one of the things that he's talked about, it would be a backup for the CAD area, but also that it would allow them to develop and print out posters, signs, banners, and actually had said that he could do some posters in town. These would be temporary type things, signs, like election signs, that kind of thing. That would be just under $4,000. They're looking for 3 copies of Adobe Creative Suite 3, 2 Mac versions, 1 PC version related to internet and website development. The original price was, I think, $449. We got an educational price and have dropped it down to $1,100. Middle school is looking for 100 textbooks, Spanish 2 textbooks for grade 8, which is a new course offering at the middle school. The $6,974 would cover textbooks, teacher materials, and teacher editions, also out of the surplus. IGO School, Mike O'Leary has procured a price. We'd like to install a window in the wall between where the office staff is and the outer doors and the smoke doors, because in that office area, as it stands now, there's a doorway, but you can't see who's going by. So from a safety standpoint, we'd like to install a window area so that it's very easy to see who is coming and going in the building. And along with that, in that office area, there are 2 desks, and there's a wall that was at some point installed. It was a temporary wall. We'd like to take that down and have a counter built, an L-shaped counter, similar to what was built at the Taylor School, and do away with the 2 desks. IGO School needs to replace the laminator that they have, and IGO School would also like a projection screen that we would mount in the ceiling of the cafeteria, all funded from surplus. On the district-wide section, the ELA K-6 consumables, there's an attached list for the $24,794. These are items that in actuality are in the budget for FY08, predominantly elementary school and some middle school in terms of grades 5 and 6. We've seen a substantial price increase in paper, as an example. We've been paying $22.48 a case for paper. The bid that we just opened that will go into effect for July 1st pushes the price up over $24. With the price of gas now going back up, we're seeing price increases everywhere. By buying these out of the surplus, it would give the elementary schools primarily a little bit of extra money to absorb some of the price increases that we're experiencing. In addition, I'll point out that the elementary schools really had no increase in their supply accounts in terms of cost, where the high school did, and there was some slight increases at middle school. The ELA 7 to 12, $35,373. That money is in the textbook adoption account, so we already have that money set aside. The manipulators for Think Math, we talked about this earlier. There was money appropriated for the textbooks, and then there was the balance of the $90,000 for the manipulatives. That is in the existing budget, so it did not contribute to the surplus. And I believe this was last year, but Ingrid, I don't remember.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. There had been an inventory of globes and maps at the elementary level, and the globes and maps were outdated. That did not list current countries, which made instruction somewhat difficult. We had made a purchase of some maps and globes that were updated. The intent was to purchase some the next year. We did not do that last year. so that we'd like to purchase 30 globes, 10 for each elementary school, and maps, 5 for each elementary school, to update and make more current the ones that we have.
That new need is due to the realignment of the social studies. Fourth grade went, for example, went to all geography. It was based on that.
I just had a question, just going back to the kindergarten, the practice book collection under the ELA. Why isn't the borough receiving practice book collection? It says only the Igo Taylor teachers want the practice book. Why
They all
isn't-
should be getting it.
That's an issue we're working on resolving. All three will do the same
Yeah,
thing.
all three will
Okay,
get it.
good.
It's an error.
Okay.
We talked earlier about the emergency communication system. We talked about 25 radios. That would include chargers, repeater, and associated equipment. The emergency notification callback system, $15,000 is really a placeholder. The prices have run anywhere from there is no upfront cost and you pay per call to a slight upfront cost plus per call, or a cost and it's unlimited calls. It's something, as the chief said, we need to talk a little bit more about, but I have that in as a placeholder. Those two items total $45,000. We had projected a balance in the building revolving rental account of $332,000, so there'd be sufficient funds for that, and where it is a revolving account, it would not, we wouldn't be required to issue a PO for it by July 1st. Certainly with the intent to have something in place by September. The next item on the list, 20 magnetic whiteboards. If you walk around the high school particularly, you'll see a lot of the whiteboards are really nasty looking. And there's two types of whiteboards that you can buy, and it's melamine, it's a plastic. And the melamine is the less expensive whiteboard to buy, and after a while they just get cloudy and dirty, and you really can't clean them. With the magnetic ones, it's got a magnetic back in it. It's covered with porcelain. They clean up really nice. They last forever, basically. Throughout the district, we'd like to go out, do an assessment, and replace 20 of these boards that are really in tough shape. We'd also like to replace 20 of the staff chairs. I'm constantly getting calls that some of the teacher chairs are in really tough shape. So we'd like to purchase 20, and again, we'll make an assessment and then go out through the district and figure out where the worst of the lot are. In addition, people are always looking for locking file cabinets, so I've asked for locking file cabinets to $1,800. That rounds out the money for the surplus property, surplus priorities. In addition, the music department had submitted a list that was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of musical instruments that I talked to Mr. Massey about in terms of, it would have been a CIP and probably a bond issue, depending on the total, which was something the town had done a number of years ago. I then went back to him and asked him for a list that he could give me, that in the event we had some surplus funds, could he prioritize that list on a smaller scale, and maybe we could peck away at this. He did. And the number one item on the list was 4 model 11D Con double French horns. I went back to Mr. Massey and said to him, all right, now you've got me confused. Your number one item is 4 French horns, so should I put on the list 4 French horns? It's going to sound like the Christmas 6 baritone sax and so forth. Or would you like one of each one of these? And he said, no, my first priority is I need 4 double French horns. So this is the list that he had provided me that added up to $122,000. So as the surplus items have added up, they add up to $90,383. Given that we're projecting a $145,000 surplus, I'd like to take $55,000 of the balance of the surplus and purchase musical instruments, additional musical instruments in accordance with Mr. Massey's list.
So then he'll turn around and he'll tell you which ones he's...
Yes. And we might very well get to the next one on the list based on a bid, because we would expect more competitive prices.
Okay.
Or we will.
Would it be possible to give us a list of the balances in all the revolving accounts? at some point so
Sure.
that we can, while we're looking at the needs, we can look at what the.
Yeah, I think the last time I had given you, it was March 15th.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
Is that changed? Is that?
I can go back and reconcile to it. There won't be major changes
Okay.
from what I had
Okay.
projected on March 15th.
I don't think Paul's looking for a vote by the committee tonight to spend in any one of these areas. I think he's looking for some general direction, he and Jan, that will entertain these. When you look here, there's a couple of factors we still have to consider. In the next 6 weeks, things could change, and the number could go up or down. Number two, as we look at in this case, for instance, based on all the requests, we're $70,000 short from those requests. We could look at revolving accounts to make up that difference if we wanted to. But we also have to decide as a committee, from a strategic standpoint, do we believe, as we heard last year by lots of citizens, that the money that was given us we should be spending. And so what we've tried to do this year is have tighter budget controls and monthly reports, et cetera. And so obviously the surplus this year is substantially less than it's been in the past. And part of that is the advisory committee having us take money out at the beginning of the year, which we did. And so we're running fairly close. We're running within that 1% factor of what the original budget was. And so the question then becomes, from a committee standpoint, whether the committee is interested in funding these types of items or giving the money back to the town. What I shared with Paul is I think that a lot of these needs are important needs to the school. We were given the funds that we needed to do, and therefore we should look at each of these items, and those that are necessary we should be funding out of the surplus first. And those that we don't have surplus for, if we, again, still believe that we have that particular need, we ought to be looking for the revolving accounts if necessary to do that. At our next meeting in June is when Paul and Jan will be looking for a vote on where we're going to spend the money. But the idea was to give the committee full disclosure on where does the administration feel that their needs are, to prioritize them into 1, 2, or 3 buckets. And it wasn't that we were trying to treat music unfairly by putting it in the 4th bucket, but we wanted to treat music in a different way. And so it gives the committee a chance to think about how they might want to do things. It also gives the public an opportunity to see what the administration is thinking, and any input that the public would have, they would be able to share with us between now and our next meeting so that we could then make a decision. Obviously, we have a member of the advisory committee here in the audience tonight, so she can take these reports back to the advisory committee as well, and any thoughts the advisory committee has, they can feel free to share through her at our next meeting as well.
I think what's important is this gives us a starting point as to what to do with this money. And I think we've been very good about this year, moving things around and making sure that we weren't going without during the year. So I think we've planned accordingly. And I'm very comfortable with this list. I wish we could do everything on it, but realistically we might not be able to. But if we can, or if we can find other sources outside, then certainly we should investigate those. So I'm very comfortable with this list, and we're just going to have to see where the money falls at the end.
I'm comfortable. I just want to mention a couple of things. Dr. Norton and I talked about the need for defibrillators. We have a number of teams, after-school activities. Obviously, we qualify and we follow all guidelines of the MIAA. And at football games, for instance, the athletic trainer will always have a defibrillator with them. But we have kids, and as has just been pointed out, in 3 surrounding towns, not far from us, because of the increasing incident of athletes experiencing sudden death. We've had, it could also happen to parents on a practice field. I think we need to look at, and then start to step up the purchase of defibrillators. There are certain teams, whether baseball, girls softball, I don't know how you do track, but I do know lacrosse. Medway High School, after their tragic loss, they beefed up their defibrillators. The price has fallen to $1,500. I'm not saying, and the number we would need is 6. I'm not even saying get all 6 now. But if that price for the kind that we want, that we have, that are in fact compatible with our fire department, We have them at the Ahern, we have them at the high school. I think we need to start looking at ways that we also put them in the hands of the coaches so that when our male and female students are out there practicing, that we have taken all steps that we need to. And I think that should be on the list. I think it is really a priority. It's very frightening to see what happened in 3 nearby towns. I don't think we can disregard it.
Jan, your thoughts about adding that to the list?
No, I contacted Keith on it. He's still looking at it. It also about the practicality of, how many, he mentioned 6 to Kate. I just don't have a confirmed number from him,
But
or
so you'll
or
have
the
an
training or any of those other issues.
So that'll
Second
be part
piece-
of your recommendation for the next meeting then, to add it or not?
The second piece, and we've talked about this repeatedly, and as we have consolidated our athletics, particularly I'm always concerned how girls are impacted versus our male students. And we deferred on the junior varsity cheerleading, and I would hate to lose that opportunity. I believe the number was somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000, about $4,500. I think that that's important as we've collapsed some other girls' teams, gymnastics this past year. We know that we have midget football in this town that is bringing in record numbers of girls. There is no reason that we cannot field a junior varsity cheerleader. Now, as much as I'd like to have girls, I don't. It's an equity issue for me, and I really think that we shouldn't lose the opportunity for the 3rd year in a row. I think that somehow needs to be put on the list to compare.
But how do you
to
fund
something
next
else.
year's salary with this year's money?
You can't do it with this. You
Well-
can't cover this money.
We-
That should be a budget item for...
Well, I'm going to bring it up again because actually it was, the stipend is what we were, it was the cost of the uniforms.
No, it's an additional coach. It's
So
a
it's just the
staff
coaching.
member.
It's in the
It's
DRP.
budget.
Yeah, but you
It's
can't
to-
take it
it's
out
to
of
look
this.
at.
You can't cover this money
Staff
for that.
member.
But what you could think about though, Kate, is, one of the comments...
I'm being consistent. This will be the 3rd time, and I'm going to keep bringing it up because I think it's.
Well,
But-
the other thing we need to consider is if we're not fielding another team, that we could certainly, it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's just taking one coaching position from one place and putting it in another. And certainly if we have the sign-ups ahead of time, then we should be able to know that. So if the money is there in the athletic budget, Kate, but say they don't do freshman soccer, then you have a stipend for that coach. You could certainly move it over to the, another sport. I'd rather see us do
Martha,
that.
I believe it's our
I'd rather
number
see us-
one priority, and we've already
Well, then it
received in
needs
the
to be-
windfall the gymnastics. So when do the
Yeah.
girls get their fair share? That's all that's all I want to mention.
No, absolutely, but we
Yeah,
can't,
that's
we
a good
can't take it
point,
out of
Martha.
this,
All right,
okay?
any other comments?
Yes. Last year, we talked about, and I just want to assure, I know that there's money in the line budget, but it's increasingly an important issue. Our special education PAC, which has struggled for years to finance, came forward and asked if we would pay for their membership. And we're talking $100 membership, and it took months to get this. It's actually been a year. This year, for the first time, we paid for that membership. Canton, by the way, pays $3,500. So the fact that our PAC is asking for Foxborough Public Schools to pay $100 so they can be part of this membership, I think is a very reasonable cost. That we also this year, for the very first time, allotted them up to $400 for speakers. Now, in the 13 years I've been in town, I do know that they've exhausted every free speaker in the world. This year, they actually got a highly qualified and talented individual to come, and the speaking fee was about $350. I want to make sure, we don't have to vote it now, I just want to be assured that the special education PAC, the only PAC that's required by law, is in fact taken care of, or will be taken care of in that line in the special education budget. If we don't think it is, then we need to put and I'm going to recommend the $500. Okay, and remember, if they don't spend it, we're going to get $50 to $100 back. So I really would like to make sure that we have put aside somewhere formally saying that we will do the same. We will pay the membership, and we will set aside the same amount as last year, up to $400 for speakers.
That should not be a problem in the regular budget to do.
Okay.
Not be a problem
I
at
just
all.
want to make
Can't do it out
sure.
of this.
Wendy, can you make sure that we have this in the record? Because I think it's that important, so we don't lose sight of it. Because I know we're all very supportive of it.
I'm glad you
And
brought that up.
The group struggled, so I
They
want
did,
to
I
make
spoke with
sure.
them as well this year.
Any other committee comments? All right. Before we get to other matters, I think we all know, Jan alluded to it earlier, that we had a tragic loss last week in the community. And so I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in Jordan Sibley's name. I know this is a very stressful period for his family, his friends, his teachers, and I take a lot of pride in the effort that our administration put forth in talking to his parents, in talking to the students, and doing the things they needed to. We also had representation at his funeral by administration and by school committee members as well.
I think the other thing is to offer our condolences to Stoughton, who was greatly impacted by this. He had been in that school system for many years before he came here, and they were truly devastated themselves by what transpired, and we need to be mindful of them also.
All right, other matters. Dr. Norton?
I have money. I have a letter from Inventus, and it is sent to Mr. Theodos, and it reads, please find enclosed a contribution check of $1,500 to cover the purchase of materials for the new engineering course being introduced in 2007-2008 school year. It was exciting to learn about the group of Foxborough High School students who were lobbying for this course offering, and then to see the request implemented. We are ready to work with the teacher in helping to bring the coursework to life through real-world projects, workplace examples and tours, and discussion with engineers from Inventus. So first of all, I'd like for you to accept the check for $1,500.
I motion that we accept the check for $1,500
Motion made
for
by
engineering.
Bev Lord, seconded by Katie Adair. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
The letter goes on. Also enclosed is a grant contribution of $4,500 to support a professional development keynote address, followed by a series of workshops aimed at improving classroom management practices and the ability of teachers to meet the range of student learners, especially especially the reluctant learners. We hope this series energizes and equips the high school and middle school teachers in Foxborough and perhaps from other school districts, as you expect that it will. We are pleased to support such an important area of improvement that will especially inspire new teachers and their mentors, but also has the potential of positively impacting a wide range of the student body. I'd like for you to accept a check for $4,500.
Motion by Katie.
I'll second.
Katie.
We answered interchangeably.
I'm sorry, Kate, that's sorry. They sit next to each other too. It's by Kate, second by Bev Lord. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
I don't have any more checks, but I do have a commercial. This is the Expanding Horizons program that we have offered here in Foxborough for several years. This year, we've worked very hard at making it easy for parents, because everything that is offered during the summer is now in one booklet. So you're not going to receive a letter from here and a letter from there and an email from something else that says, would you like to try this? It's all here. I know we've had a lot of things going on this year, and the weather has not been conducive to thinking about summer. However, our enrollment is down, and I love for you, if you are thinking about it, please take a look at it. If you need another book, we'll be more than happy to send you one. I believe it's also available online. There's some really wonderful opportunities for the children in Foxborough. I'm particularly looking again at the math camp that Inventus has been supplementing. Great opportunities. So if you're looking for something for your child, take a look at it. Please sign up. Expanding Horizons.
Anything else?
Nope. I'm finished.
Deb?
For those of us who remember, Jim Pettingill passed away recently on the Cape, and he spent his career in education in the Ahern School in Foxborough. So please extended to his family.
His son and I graduated together.
And I'd like to take this opportunity personally, thank you, and I think you have been a wonderful chairperson this past year, Madam Chairman. Your creating openness has led to, which I think, with the help of Paul Jackson, incredible budgetary things. It has created the confidence and openness and positive feelings so that people work innumerable hours and create things like this district improvement plan. The morale in the system has not been this good for years. I think what you have accomplished in 1 year more than matches what happened in the past decade.
Thank you.
And you are very deeply concerned, and we're so for 9 years. And then I started championing the past 4, the importance, the necessity of the policies. I personally would like to suggest that you continue to spearhead that committee for us, please, to its fruition.
You ask the chair, and I'll make a motion.
I think we'd like to consider it. You've done a noble job so far, and you understand the importance of keeping policy, as rules and regulations, procedures, our implementation of those.
That I owe to my husband. He's a policy guru in his organization, so.
Oh, we need her. We have to keep her in
Well, the
that
chair has
position.
no pride, so I have no problem with Martha continuing that piece and leading the dialogue there. Each of us have participated equally in that discussion. It's been a good process from that standpoint, so there's no problem from that standpoint.
We'll
You
get
got
it
a
done.
nomination?
If Martha would like to do that, it's fine with me, not an issue.
We'll keep it going. We're almost there.
Yeah.
Well.
I know, and then I saw this, I was like,
Did
oh
you
my
see
God.
what got dropped off
Some
tonight?
sections are a lot thicker than others.
Debbie, did you have anything else?
No, I'm sure
Okay.
that you can.
Kate?
Martha, also, the chairman works harder than anyone. That's why I'm not doing that. I know how hard it is, and thank you for that, for all your hard work.
I'm looking forward to a year in a different seat, believe me.
Same chair.
Oh, the round table, the curved table. It'll be 4 years on. Could we find, and we found out it was only $150. Could we get the curved table so we all will be able to sit and,
This is not bad. I like
They
this.
bought these 4 tables.
when they
Yeah,
take
bought
away your
these for
chair?
it. Yes.
No, the chair migrates.
Yes.
Chair members,
No,
oh, chair goes with me. This
Chair
chair.
goes with it.
I would just like to add, it's also a commercial, again, just to remind parents, the follow-up meeting to the Alcohol and Drug Forum. The second meeting to discuss the 6 action items is scheduled for June 4th at 7 o'clock at the high school cafeteria.
I thought it was June 6th.
June 6th. What did I
June
say?
4 is our.
Oh, that's our
our
school
meeting.
committee, I'm sorry.
June
June 6th, thank you. June 6th.
That's
Great to have the commercial. Well, no, it's right, thank you. Okay, 4 and 6.
June 6th is the next alcohol forum.
Right, Wednesday, June 6th.
Anything else, Kate? Katie?
Again, I want to echo my thanks to you, Martha. I think you've done a fabulous job this past year, and I don't want to repeat what everyone said, but you just did an outstanding job, and we're very thankful that you let us.
Well, I'll be happy to see my cell phone bill go down. That's
Oh, you'll miss me.
And just one announcement, the Ahern is having an art show this
Oh,
Thursday
yes.
from 6 to 7:30, and all 4 grades will be represented, 5 through 8. So please come, because it's always a wonderful, wonderful show. So this Thursday, 6 to 7:30 at the Ahern. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead.
I understand that the Pops concert night, I unfortunately was able to attend, but there's nothing like a father's pride, and apparently Larry's son finally did his solo. I was beginning to think he didn't think him and Judy would live long enough to see it, and they did, and apparently it was outstanding, and I'm looking forward to watching it on TV.
Oh, also, I
was
believe
wonderful.
the final concert, music concert, is this Thursday also, isn't it?
There's one Thursday, and then there'll be a concert on the Common
Common, but
coming
the-
up as well.
Last one at school
I think it's
is this
bittersweet
Thursday.
for the seniors.
The seniors, yeah.
And they have a potluck dinner on Friday evening for the music, and they do a special thing for the seniors. Also, just so that people know, we're losing a music teacher this year. Someone who has, I understand, been here for about 12 years. Someone who gives 150% to the children in the school, who's taken the choral program from what it used to be to a whole new stratosphere. And Leslie Kasang is going to be missed dramatically by the children and the students in this school district, as well as her fellow professionals. And as I've said to her, we cannot replace her. She's not replaceable. We'll just have to look for someone else to do that job. We're very fortunate. All of our music teachers give 150% of their time. Mr. Massey is often here at 6:30 in the morning with students. He's here till 9:30 at night with students, giving them personal time, personal attention. The people we have in the music program, many of them have been here 30 years. They do the work of two people in other school districts, and their life is the students and the program, and the lessons that they teach these folks is music does make the difference. And there are studies that show that it develops the brain in very different ways, in very positive ways, and we are fortunate to have such a world-class music program. I do know that there are some teachers at the high school that are a little frustrated at times with the music program because the kids go to Toronto or they go to New York and they miss some school, and there's always a struggle for that kind of a thing. But I do know that the community is very proud of that program, like we are with our sports programs and our academic programs. And if we can find a way to continue to build the students' morale and their pride and their self-confidence in those kinds of programs, we will continue to make wonderful future adults. Martha, do you have anything else? Okay. One thing that we do have on the agenda an executive session to discuss non-union negotiations. And what I'd like to do first, before we decide whether or not we want to go there, I'd like to just have a brief discussion with the committee. As you know, we have union agreements and we have contractual rates in there for all the union folks. We have administrators that are non-union folks. And so the committee discusses, at this time of year, what are we going to do for the administrative folks? I've had a discussion with Jan that I personally do not believe in cost of living adjustments. I think they should be real merit adjustments. Jan has indicated that it's difficult at the end of the year to say, oh, by the way, we didn't have any goals and objectives for you, but we're going to hold you accountable and your increase is going to be tied to some kind of a merit increase. But she's agreed that, we really should have in place, and we should talk to Dr. Martis about setting goals and objectives for everybody in administration, and then in the next fiscal year, holding them accountable and giving them merit increases. My personal view is you have someone that works 150% and they get 3%, and someone who works 110%, they get 3%. There's not a way to differentiate it. When you're in a union, everything is by steps. When you're not in a union, to me, it should be based on your own performance and the contributions you've made. But it is not fair at this point to do that. And so my thought was that, and certainly discuss it with the committee, rather than just going to executive session to talk about what the pool might be or not be, I'm not sure that there's a need to discuss that in an executive session. We're not discussing anyone's raise in particular. Jan has actually had a proposal that she thought would balance things, and I'm not sure there's a need to discuss that in executive session. I don't see why we can't discuss it in public session, but I want to, since I've only been here a year, and we have 3 members that have been here a lot longer than me. I'd like to ask you for your thoughts and ideas about whether we could discuss this fairly easily, fairly quickly in public, rather than go into an executive session. And thoughts of the committee.
I think historically we've always gone into executive session for it. I don't have a list of who we're talking about right at the moment, and I can't think off of my head, but I don't know. I'd like to hear.
And Jan doesn't have a list either. It's a matter of, is it going to be 3%, is it going to be 2%, is it going to be 2 and 1? Is it, what's the formula going to be? And it just seemed to me that we could discuss that in public. We don't have to discuss it in an executive session to agree to that, because we're not discussing any one individual, nor are we discussing necessarily something that we have to negotiate with a union, and therefore you would not want to share that strategy. And just in a spirit of openness and transparency, I thought we might discuss the idea in open session. Different than we've done in the past. I throw it out for the committee to think about. Debbie, your thought?
We are going to discuss the possibility of changing
No, do you want to give a 3% raise to the administrators? Do you want to give a 4%? Do you want to give a 2%? Do you want to give a 1 and a 2, a 2 and a 1, a 1, a 1, a 1? Basically, we have to decide what pool of money is going to be available for non-union administrators. And to me, to go into executive session to decide it's 3 versus 2 versus 4 versus 1 now and 1 in December, or 2 now, and have the rest of it be for a merit pool that Chris could use with a 6-month review of all the administrators, that's what we'd be discussing in executive session. I thought we could discuss that openly.
Well, before we have kind of balanced it out and looked at what has been happening overall with teachers,
Yep.
it just, usually we have a few facts and figures to be a little fairer about it. I don't want to just talk here without having any numerical figures in front of me.
I don't think Jan has a piece of paper she's going to hand to us in executive session.
Gonna go run some copies. I was just going to speak from it.
Okay, I think she was just going to speak from that, but I'm not trying to do anything that is radical, but we talked about transparency as a committee. We've talked about it a lot last year. We've made a lot of progress in that respect, and I thought we might try it, but it's certainly up to the committee.
I want to go back to what Martha said. I think it's fine to have, and if you would like to have a general discussion of what I think my compensation pay for performance philosophies are, I'd be happy to share with you. But I think there's something that we need to be in agreement. I want to see us, whatever the little bit of bucks we have, this is the opportunity to say we need to motivate and do the best we can for our administrators. You know, we do that for our teachers and other staff. We have negotiated contracts. We've had to ask our administrators to sometimes suck it up, and I don't know how much money is there. And I personally want to make sure that they get the maximum, but I want to be able to have that discussion and strategize with my colleagues, and I do think it's appropriate that this particular item is very appropriate. So we don't discuss individuals, and I think that's a fine point that you make, but our strategy to how we maximize that is, I think, something that's appropriate for executive session.
I don't disagree that it's appropriate.
And when you go for true pay for performance, there are other sticks that you have. So I think that's the conversation that we really need to have in executive session. But the piece on goals and objectives, that could be for a future open discussion. Obviously, we want to get the administrators' input as well. I've been told that they have had goals and objectives. So, but we have not, as a school committee, always been privy to them. So I think to start that process, kick that off with a public discussion, and that would be fine. I just don't know how much we want to continue to overlay.
No, hold on, Beverly.
It's just historically.
Right. This is just from the year 2000 to 2019. It says.
2000 to 2000.
2010? Mine says 2010.
It says 2019. It goes from 2009 to 2019.
This is a public document. All this is historical information on what the increases have been for teachers, nurses, educational assistants, bus drivers, custodians, secretaries, 2000, 2001, 2002, etc.
And then we fast forwarded 10 years.
Right, 2019. Jan's coming back for a party.
And boy, they're going to be disappointed in 2019.
I don't disagree that this is a proper purpose for executive session.
Yeah.
I just thought, in a spirit of transparency, we know how much money's in the budget. Paul can tell us that very quickly. We know what we've given everyone else. Jan has a suggestion. We can discuss that in executive session. We can discuss it in public session. I'll take the pleasure of the board. I'll take a motion.
I actually would like to see us strategize, perhaps, in executive session.
Make the motion.
I know you didn't ask me, Larry, but I would like to just weigh in on it, too.
Please.
I agree with what you just said. I think it is a strategy, and I think it does seem to fit into the executive session at this time. Now, again, certainly goals and objectives, but I think it's a forum for that.
I'll accept the motion. to go into executive session?
I would like to, I make a motion to go into executive session to discuss non-union.
Strategy for non-union negotiations. The motion is made by Bevy.
Seconded.
It is seconded by Katie, I'm sorry.
Just one of the Ks.
I will poll the board. Beverly?
Aye.
Kate?
Is roll call, correct?
Roll call.
Aye.
Martha? And I'll, aye. All right, so we'll go into executive session with the purpose of not coming back into the public session.
This is a typo, right?
Ms. Abrams, you have your early release.
Last day.
Early release, last day.
Yeah, you should be paroled. You're being paroled. You're early release.